Okay, so welcome everybody. Just to inform you also, we have 70 people now and getting higher the figure connected online for distribution. I will come back to this. I just want to start also introducing you to Riad, Dr. Riad Hartani, which is my colleague, partner in Xona Partners, which we are setting up this I think, very interesting and challenging workshop. Basically, I think Riad has lots of experience also in this field too, but we are very much welcome for you also coming here, getting connected, and try to discover what are the activities that will be running on this technology, on this new space, new economy, and all that follows here. Right, so I don't know, just Riad, if you want to say a few words just for the welcoming.
No, I mean, first of all, thank you, Sergi, for your organization and working together on this. Thank you all here for attending, and thank you all in the cloud to for joining us here. I think we counted like people from over 20 countries, right? And spread out on every continent, and sharing the same sort of like topic of discussion today, which is really what's going on in this space internet and the intersection of space internet, the innovation, the challenges, and how we approach it. So we have a diverse set of speakers. They come from like not only a technology research and development background, but also from the legal world, from the finance, investing, from a deployment, service providers, and from the users. So we try to have a sort of like a mix of speakers and panelists to try to have a 360 view on what's happening in terms of low Earth orbit constellations.
Sure. Okay, so I think that it's time to start. So one more thing is that we will be very strict on the timing. So we have many people, many from online. So don't feel rude if we have to cut you at some point. But the idea is that we keep these 10-minute speeches for all of you. Most of you are already here from the room. But the idea is that we all have time for everybody. In the end, we have also some activities, and we'll come out later on to this explanation. So first of all, I want to welcome the General Director from the Catalan government, Dani Marco. Dani Marco will expose a bit the vision of the government and what they think the strategy that could be behind the new space. So welcome, and thank you very much, Dani.
Thank you very much, Sergi, Riad. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Also, thank you very much for being here, and thank you very much for all the people that it's connected from abroad. On behalf of the government of Catalonia, a very warm welcome to all of you, and thank you very much to the organizer, I2CAT, and Xona Partners, and the supporters, the Barcelona Chamber of Commerce, the Mobile World Capital Foundation, and the government of Catalonia for this amazing conference that it's really connected around the world. And it's a pleasure to be here with all of you and all the other people. We are ending a strange week because right now we used to be at the last day of the Mobile World Congress. It has been impossible, but at the same time, it has been an amazing week where the digital community of Barcelona and Catalonia has developed the Barcelona Tech Spirit with more than 40 different activities like today. And thank you very much to all the people that has been done this possible, all the institutions and all the organizations that have been working all together. And today we will end this week with a very high topic. When I mean high, I mean very, very, very high for us. And it's this vision about the digital revolution from the space. Catalonia played a leading role in the industrial revolution, and we want to play also a strategic role in this current digital revolution. In this sense, the government of Catalonia made a clear commitment to promote an ambitious strategy in the digital field. We want to become a digital nation. The Catalan government, in this sense, plays a strategic role to promoting the digital advanced technologies, such as IoT, 5G, big data, artificial intelligence, blockchain, cybersecurity, and the new space technologies. The development of these technologies also arrives to the convergences. And it will generate new solutions, new business models, and new digital markets. We have examples in the autonomous driving sector, in the smart drone industry, and in the new space digital economy. 2 weeks ago, here in this room, The Barcelona Chamber of Commerce, in collaboration with the government of Catalonia and other many institutions, developed a conference that try to bring out the opportunities of this new space economy and the potential of Catalonia to develop our local industry in this field. We map this industry ecosystem. We already have 26 companies and more than 30 research universities and supporting institutions that are working in the current and the future development of new space economy, most focused in satellite, nano satellites, and space data processing fields. Moving forward, the new space technology is a government priority. We plan to fully support the development of this new space economy to make Catalonia an international point of reference in research, innovation, creating and attracting talent, businesses, and investments involving in this field. Right now, we are developing, in phase of developing a national strategy for the new space technologies. We are with a working group with some of the people that it's here today. And it will be ended in the next months, and later on we will launch and literally launch some of the activities regarding this new space for Catalonia. We invite all of you that are here and all of you that are in any country in the world to be aware about this pioneering strategy. We will be more than open for your participation in the development, but also attracting the projects, initiatives that you are doing in any part of the world. Right now, there is a global race to take advantage of this market, and the intersection of space and internet is one of the main issues. Today's workshop, we will feature the experts' insights and a debate by ecosystem players as on the potential of and opportunities and the threats that we will have. Alas, we'll learn about the amazing new space market and the drivers that will be needed to develop a powerful ecosystem in digital hubs as Barcelona and Catalonia. Thank you very much again for the organizers to develop the workshop and to all of you to being part for the construction of this new digital revolution also from the space. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Danny. Thank you very much for your introduction. Okay, so now I will just somehow briefly describe what's going to be the workshop about too. And I also want you to get the point, the fact that it's new space, it's new economy, and it's new opportunities. And we are here to identify how we are able to fit these new opportunities that this technology may bring us, and how also with the support of the government, we are able to position, to start identifying on how we are able to work together and to be seen not as independent players playing this role, but as a unique ecosystem which is able to strengthen the technology and to be an actor in the real world, or in the, I would say, in the white wall scene. So I think that I have my slides here. So, okay, as I said, there have been some movements lately on the new space and how we are able to approach this area. So the point today, basically, let me see if it works. Yeah, I think that maybe it's not moving. Can you please move to the next one? Let me see. Good, okay. So here I just wanted to point you a map of the different attendees that we have today on the workshop. So we are around 250 people participating on the workshop. Many of them are online, and I think it's a good opportunity also for other people to know what this technology is, what we want to empower here in the region, and what are the different type of actors that should play a role into this game. So here it may be that you can see it's a white cover in the wall, but the good point is that we not only have technologies, we have people coming, as Riad was saying, from the business models, people coming from the regulation too. We have some talks on this, how we are able that after the workshop today, you can come out and have a, I would say, a clear idea of what does it mean new space, what the CubeSat is, what are the aspects of regulation, what the mission is. So this is the idea. So the way we have distributed also the session, I will show you later, but this is some graphs, all of you registered, but I wanted also to give you the opportunity to know what your interests are. As you can see here, basically, IoT is one of the main topics. I think that there is not yet any solution which covers the IoT in this, I would say, new space area. So it's one of the topics that obviously are of much interest, but somehow it allows you to get an idea of what type of interest, what type of topics are those that the people feel much more comfortable to know about or maybe interested to dig a bit more. Then also about the profiles of the people participating on the workshop. Basically, the idea here is that you get the, as I said before, it's not only, I would say, research community, we have government, we have consultants firms, we have also people from the space agency, service providers. So it's the whole value chain, and this is what we wanted. So we wanted to put together different people, but understanding that from all of them, we can cover the whole value chain, from the starting of the beginning of designing a nanosat up to the point that we are able to receive data from this nanosat, which means that I am putting the payload, I am launching, and all the activities which are behind. Then I also want to not only to thank the sponsors of the workshop, also I want to thank the different speakers that we have here represented on the logos of the institutions. But the idea is that these are the people that are helping us on encouraging. So thanks again for this support and participation. Then how we have distributed the session, and there will be 3 blocks. So some of you already know this, but I wanted to clarify this. So the idea is that first of all, we will give an overview, what Leo is, where we are, where we want to go. So the idea is to have a broad understanding of all this ecosystem. We have 4 speakers here, so I also want to thank these speakers. So some speakers are also in the room. So the idea is that we will be calling the speakers and they will be joining us. But again, here we have people from the research, we have manufacturers. So I expect that we will get this global overview. After each one of the sessions, we will have time also for some questions. The idea is that the questions that we plan to do is questions that should be answered in 30 seconds, which means that it's not a 2 minutes question. It's a 5 seconds, 10 seconds question. So try, please, to be fast. And if you want to make a question, go to the point and let's get a fast answer, because we don't have that much time either for these roundtables. Although we expect to have 3-4 minutes after each one of the sessions. Afterwards, session 2, it's going to be dealing about technology, about deployment, about challenges. So here we will go a bit more deep on what's there, what we are working on, and what should be a topic that maybe should need much more research in order to become, let's say, a pre-product, a pre-service, or whatever before it's sent to the space. Here also I want to thank the 4 speakers. I think that we have also a very good speakers here giving their opinion, which is very good. Then after this session, we will also have a coffee break. Coffee break, it's going to last, I would say, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. So please be strict, because it's not only of you. If you only see 3 people sitting and the rest taking a coffee, do not think that, okay, I can stay a bit more, because there are maybe 100 people waiting on the online part. So we will start anyway, right? So please try to be with some empathy to the rest of the people. Third session, we will go into a topic that maybe most of you are not much used, I would say. I mean, the important thing is that whenever you are dealing about the word new, which is new space, it's because it's something new. And when it's something new, it's not that easy that I might develop some solution that I have on my lab in my table and I make it run. You have to use something which will be running in another space, something that might deal with different regulation, also because it might happen that it's not always over you, which is something which is running over the wall. So there are many things also that needs to be considered whenever you enter this game, which is a different game. So the idea here is to get some opinions from experts, so maybe lawyers giving the opinion, specialists on this area. And in the end, also, we want to dig a bit more also on the business models, because in the end, as you all know, it's not about technology, it's about the business model. So what makes sense is something that has a return of investment. You can have the best technology, but if you're not able to have the model that it works with, then it's useless. So the task here also is to see whether we get some opinions or feedback on this topic too. Then we will have some conclusions. Riad also will handle this part, and let's see, we together will be here jumping whenever it's needed. But the idea is that we will also discuss this point. And we will finish with a hands-on session. So we do this after the conclusions, because obviously the online people maybe Some of them cannot have this hands-on, although they can stay. So you will be able to follow it through the presentation. But the idea is that we have here experts, OpenCosmos, which is a manufacturer of nanosatellites, of CubeSats, that will explain how you can simulate your own mission and what you could do with the tools that they are providing nowadays. So I think that it's quite interesting. Also, it's going to be around 15, 20 minutes at all, but with 20 minutes, you should be able to see how you can plan your own mission. So thanks again also for coming for this explanation. Okay, so I think that this is all for today. So I will start with the different speakers that we have. So we will start the session now. Let me see one moment. I have the document here. You have to?
Yes,
you have the slides here?
I think the slides are there, yeah.
Okay, no, because we have the agenda with the first one, as Adriano. So, okay, we are sorting out a couple of issues that we have with the connectivity and the presentations. So I don't know, do you have any question so far? Well, we have this couple of minutes because it seems that some people are not able to follow up with the slides. This is live event, so it happens. No panic. Any questions? Something that you want to ask before we come out or we solve the problem? Yeah, please. Excuse me, we have a woman, yeah.
Hello, hello, hello. So my name is Juan Grosso from RDI Network. Here I'm from Barcelona. Just a question to the representative of the government. I think his name was Danny. You mentioned that there are 26 companies, if I recall correctly, in Catalonia that were mapped. Is this map available? Is this information available? And how can we get that?
Yes, this is available. It's in the website of Axio. If you look for in Google New Space Catalonia, you will find it. It's a report with all the companies and other information about the new space economy.
Okay, so any other question? While we are waiting, let's see if we sorted out the issues. Well, this is more slow.
Maybe you should ask questions.
Yeah. Just to give an idea of the people that's here, who comes from research centers? Can you wave your hand just to have an idea? Okay, perfect. Manufacturers? Oh, quite a few. Service provider, any?
And from the users, like the users of all these constellations? All right. Well, we have one big user here.
Okay, let's see if we manage to go ahead. Well, it's a complexity. I mean, we know. I mean, all these issues, all the people connected at the same time. So, and we had to handle with the facilities we have now. So let's see how it goes on the backside.
They have issues with the cloud people?
No, with the presentations. I think they messed it up a bit.
Okay.
Maybe we should move to the physical presentation first, or let me check.
Yeah.
Wait a second.
Okay.
Okay, so
all right.
You start with the keynote speech.
Okay, and is it okay for the guys in the cloud?
Yes, it's okay, right, for the guys? Hey?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Okay,
go
great.
ahead.
Yeah, this one. Yeah, okay. It's working? This one isn't working, huh? No? This one? Yeah. Oh.
No.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I think Sergi and I started planning this workshop, I think a couple of months ago.
Yes.
And we had it all planned for the Mobile Congress with basically all the logistics sorted out and so on. And then I think about 3-4 weeks ago, we made the decision not to have the Mobile Congress. And then we had this question to answer. Shall we move ahead with the workshop, yes or no? And then we debated that because we had all these people attending, coming from somewhere else, physically here. It was way easier. And finally, we decided to go ahead. And I think, remember what Sergi was saying, that we should go ahead with this workshop even if we have people attending from the space, right? Over the cloud. So anyway, so I've been in the internet space, primarily involved in building the internet infrastructure for the last pretty much 20-25 years, right after my PhD. So I basically followed a lot of the incremental iterations that we've seen in anything internet, like the data center world, the broadband world, the 3G, 4G, 5G world, you name it, right? So I've seen it from different angles as somebody building startups primarily in the Silicon Valley. So I've done few building the infrastructure. And then I've seen it from the perspective of the investors, basically funding those who build those startups, as well as the guys big companies buying, basically acquisitions, right? And I've seen it from different angles geographically as well, North America, US mostly, but also Japan, Korea, and other parts of the world, Europe, and so on. What I can say is, the late 90s, and a lot of us got into this whole internet build is because it really felt a time where there was something new coming in, where a lot of the innovation was happening, and that everything was possible, right? Basically, it was new, challenging. So there was a big rush in the late 90s around building that internet infrastructure. Then I think, and that's my personal opinion, post that, it's been primarily incremental. Of course, other things happened in other areas, but as far as building the infrastructure, been primarily incremental. We had sort of the baseline for the mobile fixed networks done. We had the baseline for the data center clouds done, and then incremental up till today. Because I think today, at least in my mind, I'm seeing again that energy and excitement that we've seen in the late 90s as far as basically the energy put into things, the type of work being done, and as well the challenges that we're facing, and then the potential that it brings, right? I think about 2-3 months ago, I think the dates are there. There was in the sky, in the sky you would see this sort of lights, sort of a train in the sky, right? And a lot of people were sort of waking up and say, what is that really, right? It was one of the first batch of Constellation Starlink SpaceX being launched at that time. And then, there was a big question popping up, which is, all this investment, all this constellations going up, all this energy putting into this, why is it going to be different this time? As some of you know, the idea of launching satellites in low Earth orbit is not new. It's been going on for a long time, and number of constellations basically went up, a while back. But it came with mitigated success. Some did succeed, but most of them did not. And it was not seen as the big success everyone was expecting. So the question was, is it gonna be the same thing this time, right? I believe that, a number of things have changed over the last, 10-15 years in terms of space launch technology, in terms of satellite build technology, in terms of, many other things. But also what changed here this time is you have a lot more, funding, and primarily private funding going into building this constellation. You have a lot more incentive in terms of a business case, business model to go and cover a lot of the world, which, is basically this whole internet connectivity penetration is sort of a baseline for all the cloud models and the e-commerce models out there. So these actors that are basically, having all these business models need that internet to go everywhere. So there's an incentive to go and deploy. So the answer, and we don't know the answer for sure today, but it's likely that this time we have a better, a business case, business model incentive to make the whole thing work, right? And also, I think one should keep in mind that, we should see this whole low Earth orbit constellations going up in the context of other very fundamental things happening in the internet overall, from like driven by 5G and so on. I listed a few of them that are basically changing a lot of the dynamics. I mean, things like, basically taking the clouds that we have and moving them to the edge. Things like, having high frequency 5G, networks, which basically pushes a lot of the models around like sharing and neutral hosting and all of that. So there are a number of things that are happening that, makes me believe that we are at a time where there's a lot of excitement and a lot of new things coming up. I'm gonna basically do this presentation with the idea that, I'm gonna be touching very briefly on some of the points that you're gonna be, hearing about in the rest of the presentation throughout this afternoon. Very briefly, low Earth orbit constellation basically sits around what you see on the left side there, around 1,000 kilometers plus minus, a few hundred kilometers, lower latencies between 50 and 80 milliseconds. And then you have obviously the mid-Earth orbit, and you have the geostationary satellites that have been going on for a long time, right? Just to set the context. A number of players and a number of deployments are going on as we speak now, or happening over the next few years. I just took a snapshot, and I think it's very interesting to see the variety of the players getting into the low Earth orbit constellations. You have obviously, the satellite, service providers that have been here for a long time, but that you have a number of new entrants, mainly from the cloud business, and looking at basically complementing their connectivity models with this satellite constellations. And then you have it across the world. I mean, you have a good, efforts going on in North America. You have them in Europe, but you also have them in Japan, in Korea, in China, and a few other places, right? There are, last time I counted, and depends how you count, and depends who you talk to, and depends on the size of the constellations, but you're talking, about 10 to 15 constellations being planned for launch at the moment. Yeah, and then your feedback, maybe there will be way too many satellites up in the air, and we'll come back to that. There is a lot of venture capital money going into the constellation business as well. I just took a snapshot here from what's happening in terms of space technologies, and you will see the proportion of low Earth orbit investments and the share increasing over time. It has already increased over the last 2 or 3 years, and it's complementing what has been done in terms of launch technology and satellite build and service provider build. Another example of what's going on here. I mean, some of the investment that happened last year from companies that I'm listing here on the left side and here as well. So I think what one needs to take out of this, it's really the variety of funding that's going into space. Used to be primarily government funding. There is a lot more private funding from different varieties of private funding as well happening at the moment. And I think this combination has the potential for a win-win moving forward. So what's driving satellite constellations evolution here? A number of things. But if you ask me, I think the most important is really this notion that given the technologies and the cost of handling these technologies, as you know, I mean, the cost of launching has come down a lot. Last I counted, there were at least 100 launch companies just for satellites. The cost of building satellites of smaller sizes, has come down a lot as well. But I think what's really different this time is over the last 10 years or so, we've seen a number of companies building their global businesses on the cloud, leveraging the notion that the audience, the consumers, or the enterprises are on the internet. And then, the business model you're building is function of those people on the internet and the broadband speeds they have and all of that stuff. The same players and the same models need more of the internet going to into rural, into the emerging world. There's a lot more to do in terms of connecting the unconnected as well. And we're going to have a presentation on that, from Africa, for example, at the end of the session. So I think that energy coming from those that need the internet the most for their own business models is what making things different this time. Applications, variety of applications. I think you can see this low Earth orbit constellations going on, to basically approach broadband and penetration and speeds with different cost models and business models. But there is also the aspects that relate to basically complementing 5G. There's a lot of work going on into 5G plus satellites, in multiple standards. There is the whole dimension of Internet of Things and extending the terrestrial reach, with satellite reach for IoT, ubiquitous connectivity and so on. So multiple applications and going into multiple verticals. Depends who you talk to, the priorities will be different and the needs will be different. But the expectation is that there will be a number of players with number of applications. With the team here, we did a very brief analysis of what we thought, the capacity increase that will be, enabled by low Earth orbit, and you see that increment of capacity that's coming to market. So then, as soon as you have that, then you have the question: who is it a threat to? Who can benefit from it? Who can partner with these constellations? And I put a snapshot on how that split of partners, threat, opportunities is. I think that's what we see now. I think that will be evolving over time, and that will be changing. As a matter of fact, I think you have to see this notion of competition as both in terms of competition, but also potential for partnership. Put a list of who those players would be. You have obviously the mobile operators. You have the geostationary satellite operators. You have the submarine cable operators. You have the wholesalers. You have the fixed access. Each one of these segments has its own ecosystem globally, obviously, and they're all observing this wave of low Earth orbit constellations going up. These tens of billions of dollars going into building and launching and operating these constellations over the next 5 years or so. And the main question is how can I handle that? I mean, how can I take benefit from it? How can I basically protect myself from it? And all these, in our opinion, are still early stage questions. Of course, as soon as you have a rush into doing something with a lot of the funding and the resources, I mean, human capital and and startups jumping into it, I think that's one side of the picture. Then I think you have to step back and say, I mean, a lot of them will not succeed as well. I mean, you're gonna have probably more losers than winners when you go through this, right? Because I mean, there are challenges. I mean, you have clear business challenges that are there to overcome, and I think a lot of this constellation will have to look at them and overcome them. I listed a few here. I think there is this notion with this funding that one is expecting really follow on. Would the potential competitor to this constellation adapt, either on the technology and the business model and costing and approach it, and there are regulatory challenges, right? I mean, all these licenses and spectrum and all this debris management. And so I can go on basically for the whole afternoon just talking about business challenges. There is also the technical challenges. It's one thing to say, I'm gonna launch thousands of satellites in the sky. They're all moving around. They're all talking to each other over optical links or not. I have to basically worry about a lot of things. I mean, our take is there is a lot of advances going on in this space, but a lot of technical challenges. I mean, just basic challenges. I mean, how to take, and that's something we have been working on a lot over the last 2-3 years, how to take all what has been developed into terrestrial broadband connectivity on these routing protocols and signaling protocols and IP protocols. How to take what has been developed in terms of chipset design for a lot of these 5G type devices on the NB-IoT and IoT and 5G in itself, and how to adapt it given the characteristics of low Earth orbit constellations. These are a set of issues that we've been looking at, and I think the presentations later on will basically highlight some of that and tell you more about those, right? So in summary, and I go back to what I started with here, you know, really like, you know, and that's probably a personal, like, you know, story here is, if you look at the last 20 years in this whole internet business, I think we are really at a time where, I mean, basically, it's new things happening. There's a lot of energy is going to go into it, and it's up to us basically to go and make it happen. But again, I think the challenges are there. They have to be tackled, and I think hopefully we're going to have a chance to discuss that, all of it together today across all the presentations. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Riad. Good. So, well, we will move to the next one. I think that if everything is set up, right? So we should have Professor Adriano comes at the other side. I don't know if you can listen us already. Welcome, Adriano. Yeah. 3, 2, 1. Yeah, hello. 1,
Hello.
2, 3.
Yes.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Okay, good, Adriano. So thank you again for giving us the chance to listen to you and to give the speech. So they will give you now the control of the slides, and you have 10 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sergi. Can you see my, yeah, okay. So the title of this presentation is NanoSats and SmallSats, and I will try to give a very brief overview of the current trends, both in scientific and communications missions. So, one moment. So basically, we'll start with these small satellites. Some people think they are small. Others are basically way too small. And the idea of this presentation is to try to see what you can do and what you cannot do, because everything is not feasible with these small satellites. Then I will, in topics or in sections 2 and 3, I will talk about the scientific applications for Earth observation and astrophysics. And then in number 4 for communications, and in number 5, I will try to summarize a little bit of the challenges that are coming next. So all this story about the small satellites started back to 1999 when 2 professors, one in Cal Poly, Jordi Puig and Bob Twiggs from Stanford, designed a standard, okay, basically to so that all the satellites were of the same shape, and then the interface with the rocket was easier. So that standard, it's called the CubeSat, because the satellites had the shape of a cube. As you can see here, this is the 1 unit. But immediately they realized that it was way too small, and the users start asking for larger spacecraft, so larger satellite buses, like the 2 unit, which is basically 10 centimeters times 10 centimeters times 20 centimeters, 3U, 10, 10, and 30 centimeters, 6U, which is the standard, the last of the standards that has been standardized, but there are other standards that are being used nowadays, like the 12 or even the 24 unit. The thing is that these small satellites, they are small, but they also include all the subsystems of the large satellites, and putting them in such a small volume, it's actually a real challenge. Okay, the simplicity of this standard, actually, it was not originally meant to be a standard, but then it became a de facto standard. Okay, so the way they are launched is in this sort of boxes with basically a spring that once the lid is open, ejects all the satellites. So the type of form factor that is being dominated today is up to the 3 unit. Okay, and the 3 unit is dominated because there are 2 companies. One is Planet Labs and the other is Spire. Okay, that back to 2013 start deploying their constellations, both using the 3U form factor. The trend nowadays for the future satellites that are being already manifested for launch in the coming years indicates that the CubeSats are going to grow, and the form factor that will be dominating is the 6 and the 12 unit CubeSats. So in this line, okay, in this timeline, what you see is that basically all the interesting stuff in terms of technology development occur until basically 2012, 13, Okay, all this activity, as you can see by the color bar, is basically for very small CubeSats, 1-2 unit maximum. Okay, and it was developed in university labs. After that, the market started being dominated by companies, okay, for commercial applications. And this is the timeline of the projects in which we at the UPC have been involved. We originated in 2007, and we have already launched 2 missions. And the next March, we will be launching 2 more satellites in the Vega SSMS. Okay, so sorry. Okay, so with respect to Earth observation, most of the Earth observation is dominated by optical imagers, followed by GNSS radio occultations. Okay, so basically in this chart, you see the size of the constellation. Okay, the largest 6. Okay, the second, the third, and the fourth are for Earth observation. The ones that in yellow color are for with optical imagers. The one with green color is for a passive microwave, this GNSS-RO. Okay, but Telecom is coming fast. Actually, it is here. Okay, but actually, I mean, as new players start coming in, I mean, this is the same chart 2 years ago, show basically almost 0 companies in the telecom market. But I mean, they are coming, and they are coming really fast. Sorry, I see some delay in seeing my screen advancing. Okay, so in terms of Earth observation, in 2012, there was a summary of the different technologies, okay, that can be used for Earth observation. And as you can see from this report, most of the technologies, about half of them were feasible, about 1/3 were infeasible, and the other were really problematic. But in 2017, the same study was conducted again, and all these technologies were already feasible. And actually, there were a number of missions demonstrating that these techniques could be applied from small satellites. From small satellites, I mean 3 units like this, or 6 units like this, or like this other one. Okay, I have to say that all this has been possible because NASA has invested a lot of money in making all these technologies small. We start seeing also CubeSats for astrophysics, for astrophysics applications, okay? And also, and that's a very interesting thing, also for data relay satellites, like the Mars Cube 1, Marco 1 and Marco 2, actually 2 satellites, okay? That relay the signals from a rover on Mars while it was being deployed basically back to the Mars orbiter, and from there back to the Earth. So this is a very interesting thing because CubeSats are going now to the outer planets. But coming back to the LEO orbit, okay, and coming back for communications. Nowadays, this is the slide, okay, the chart of the constellations. Here are the companies, the constellations, when they start deploying. So you see that the first deployment started taking place back to 2018, all of them, and 2019. And here are the players. And as you can see, there are 2 colors, one that is kind of blue. These are for internet, broadband internet. And the form factor of the satellite has to be a SmallSats. And when we talk about the SmallSats, it's about the size of the washing machine, about a cube of 1 meter side, and weight on the order of 100 kilos or more. There are a number of other companies, okay, that aim at smaller form factors like 1U, 3U, 6U over here, okay, and basically their application is not providing a lot of bandwidth, but it's more for IoT and machine-to-machine communications. So basically, depending on which is your budget or the type of satellite that you can afford, from the technological point of view, you will be limited to this type of communications or to internet. And we have already seen this picture here. Okay, this is the deployment of the Starlink constellation, more than 4,000 satellites planned, but actually they have filled the frequencies for several thousands, tens of thousands of satellites, or filled the frequencies, I mean. So This is another story because this is going to pose a very serious challenge in terms of how the satellites communicate between them, about basically how they divert their trajectory when they are going to collide one to the other. Actually, there was an evasive maneuver already performed by an ESA satellite because one of these satellites was about to collide with it. So, I mean, this is going to be another of the challenges. And now talking about the things that already exist. There are two examples of Internet of Things, or Internet of Satellites, as we used to say at UPC. Okay, one is this satellite from Nano Avionics. Okay, that embarks a payload from Lacuna Space that has been able to receive from ground, okay, into the space the signal transmitted by LoRaWAN payloads. Okay, the other one is this pocket cube. I didn't talk about this form factor because this one is just standardized. It's about a cube of 5 centimeters side, okay, and it has a LoRa transceiver that is basically transmitting the telemetry of the satellite and other few things. But this is also already demonstrated, training that with just a few milliwatts, you can reach low Earth orbit, of course, with a very low data rate. So there is a new paradigm coming in, is the paradigm of the federated satellite systems, in which we will have heterogeneous satellites, not all from the same manufacturer. We need to share the resources between them. So that means that this will be a win-win collaboration. As one of my colleagues used to say, this will be the Uber of space, because I mean, you will be using resources that are not yours, but you will be using them when you need them. These will be constellations that will be formed in a sporadic and opportunistic nature. And that will require the interaction of different physical technologies, different missions working together, different medium access technologies, etc., etc. And all this requires what is here, intersatellite links, okay? And these networks will have to be able to support disruption and low coverage. So, just to conclude, CubeSats, as you have seen, in less than 7 years, they have produced a disruptive innovation. They are displacing some established competitors, okay? And in the early CubeSats, they used to have short lifetimes, just a few months. This is now no longer the case. It's now a few years, even in some cases up to 4 or 5 years, when some redundancy can be built in, okay? CubeSats cannot display large scientific missions or large and medium communication satellites that require large antennas and lots of transmitted powers. But CubeSats are finding their own niche for some Earth observation missions, astrophysics, and also communications applications such as IoT and machine-to-machine communications. So the thing is that still many new technologies have to be developed. And the future, as I said, is massive constellations for communications, of course, but combining Earth observation and communications will be the next and the newest space revolution. Thanks for your attention.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Adriano. And thank you very much also to stick in time. So very interesting presentation. So thanks. Keep here because we'll have maybe some questions after the session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So we will welcome now the next speaker, which is Professor Ramon Ferrus, also from UPC, so we have a good representation, even though that also Adriano was representing the IEEC. So welcome, Ramon, and the floor is yours. So hope everything is okay. Yeah. Okay, let me see. You can take the micro, it's here. So Ramon will be talking a bit more about the standards and the implications. Yeah, and the standard implications and how this CubeSat and the next generation of the 3GPP is impacting and so on. So go ahead, thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Ramon Ferrus. I'm with Mobile Communications.
Now let me see if it's working now.
It works? No?
Now?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, good, thank you.
I'm with the Mobile Communications and Research Group at UPC. And I prepared this presentation in collaboration with Marco Guadalupe, that is CTO of Sateliot, that is a company that is trying to deliver satellite IoT services based on 3GPP standardized technologies. So the aim of this talk is to provide an overview of what is going on at the standardization level, at the 3GPP level in search of 5G specifications regarding to satellite communications. Seems to pass the...
No,
okay.
yeah.
Good. Okay, so first I'm going to give some introductory material to set up the context. Then second point, I will explain which is the current situation at 3GPP level, which are the activities already closed and which are the ongoing study items and work items to standardize satellite communications. Then some hints, some brief insight about the 3 topics that now are currently developed. And finally, a few words on the satellite proposition about using standardized interfaces for satellite communications. Okay, as all of you may know, 3GPP is the organization that brings together the global mobile industry to develop the 5G specifications, not only 5G, but also 4G, 3G, and 2G specifications. 3GPP also develops not only the radio interface, but also the whole system. It develops the radio access network, the core network, and more recently, even applications enablers for some verticals. In this context, an important achievement of the satellite industry was the introduction as part of the 5G requirements of a requirement that states that the 5G system shall be able to provide services using satellite access. This happened in 2017, almost 3 years ago, in a push from some companies within the satellite industry to align satellite communications technologies with mainstream cellular technologies, mainly to improve interoperability in case of combined systems using satellite and terrestrial, but also seeking a higher degree of commonality in the protocols using both kind of systems. So because of this requirement, then from that date, a lot of activity has taken place, triggering the analysis of use cases for to see how the satellite component can be integrated in 5G systems to satisfy different general needs, mobile broadband needs, but also specific needs in the public safety domain, maritime, airplane communications, and so on. Also, activities are ongoing with regard to the radio part to see how the 3GPP protocols, the radio interface protocols, can be adapted for satellite transmission. In this respect, this development, the adaptation of protocols for satellite transmission, is being developed under the umbrella term non-terrestrial networks, because they consider not only satellites, but also other kind of airborne vehicles, such as high altitude platforms, also to support the use cases. So now, mainly to give an illustrative view of the different integration scenarios, the different architectures, and the different operational parameters that are under consideration within 3GPP. Here there are some graphical examples of some, in this case, integration scenarios. So here we can see on the left that one possibility to exploit a satellite component for a mobile network operator is together with a terrestrial access network. Here the scenario is that there is a single mobile network with a single core network, but 2 different radio access technologies, one through the terrestrial component and another through the satellite component. A different option is, for instance, the case in the middle part of a satellite-only mobile network with a specific satellite radio access network, a specific core network, but then interconnected with other mobile network operators to provide extended services, for instance, by means of roaming agreements. And also there is the option of using the satellite not for direct access from the terminals, but mainly as a backhaul technology to connect the core network and and the radio access network. Then with regard to different architectures considered for the radio access part based on satellite, here a couple of examples. The one on the top shows an architecture using a transparent satellite. In this case, all the processing, all the radio layer processing on the network side is on the ground. Here is in 5G specifications terminology, this is the G-Node B element, that is the base station element, that it's on the ground, and it's the one that directly talks with the terminal, but this communication goes through a transparent payload in the satellite. Then this G-Node B connects to the core network. This is one of the scenarios being considered. And indeed, the scenario that is given preference nowadays in the normative development. But other scenarios have been analyzed, such as this second one that shows in this case that in the satellite, there is a regenerative payload that supports the G-Node B processing. So here the radio protocol processing is hosted in the satellite. So now the communication with the terminal is through the radio interface but now here the dialogue is between these two elements, and then the satellite is connected through the ground station to the core network. Also in this scenario, there is the consideration of inter-satellite links. And then in terms of kind of constellations, operational parameters, here are also some figures that are considered in the different studies that shows that they consider GEO constellations, LEO constellations. In case of GEO, the typical reference values are 600 kilometers altitude constellations, 1200 kilometers. They consider frequency bands in the 2 gigahertz range, the S band, and then frequency bands in the Ka band, 20, 30 gigahertz. As to the channel bandwidth, they consider, depending on the band, channel bandwidth up to 30 megahertz in the S band and up to 1 gigahertz in the millimeter wave band. Then also different configurations regarding transparent or regenerative payload, different configurations regarding, in the case of LEO, if the beams are steerable and always focusing a fixed position, or if the beams move with the satellite. This brings different challenges and opportunities depending on the solution. So this is mainly to have this idea of the elements that are discussed at the 3GPP level. Then seems that there's a okay, so now this is the right one. So this is indeed the main slide that I wanted to discuss, that shows which is the current status of the standardization activities for satellite communications. So mainly, as you know, the specifications of 5G systems is delivered in releases. This is shown in the upper part. The latest approved release of 5G specifications is release 15, that the main drop of this release was mid 2018. This year, next month, it is going to be concluded in release 16, and also work currently is going on in release 17 that is expected to be finalized by mid next year. So in this time frame, activities in the 3GPP has been developed in 3 areas that are the three areas pointed here that mainly correspond to different working groups within the 3GPP standardization. One of these areas is related to the specification of system requirements. System requirements for satellite use cases were already concluded and were part of release 16. So the release that is going to be approved now already contains in the normative phase the requirements to support satellite communications. 1 minute. Okay, so then now the work that is being done is related to architectural aspects and then to the adaptation of the radio protocol for satellite communications. And in this regard, there are 3 working items currently being addressed. One is for the definition of the satellite architecture and the interfaces between the RAN architecture and the core network. Another work item is the adaptation of the new radio protocol to support satellite transmissions. And the newest item is that is not yet in the normative phase, but is just a study item, is the adaptation of the narrowband IoT protocols for satellite transmission. Yeah. In this presentation, mainly, I think that you are going to have available this material. So mainly now for these 3 items, here I have collected the main aspects, which is the starting point, objective, and also supporting members for these of the elements. Just to emphasize that Sateliot is also following this activity and trying to push for this activity go forward. Because just to conclude, mainly one of the pillars of the Sateliot strategy is to provide an IoT services via LEO satellites, but relying on technologies standardized by the CGPP, and in particular the narrowband IoT technology.
Okay, thank you very much, Ramon.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. Pots seure allà amb nosaltres. Okay, good, thank you. So we are learning more and more bit by bit. Good, so our next speaker is online too, is Dr. Vishal Sharma from Metanoia. So let's see if you're here. Dr. Vishal, are you here?
Yes, Sergi, I'm here.
Hello, good to see you. Perfect. So in a few seconds, you will have the control of the slides. So I just want to thank you also for your time. You are quite far from here too, and we appreciate also joining us and introducing us about the LEO architectures and so on and the challenges which are behind. Thanks a lot. Good.
So just to let everyone know, I have actually activated my video. So if you see the screen at the bottom, you'll see the slides. And if you scroll at the top where the video is, you'll be able to see my video as well. So hopefully that will be a little bit better.
Okay, let's see. We have some people managing here. Let's see. You have disappeared for a while. Let's see if you are coming back. Okay, they send me 5 seconds. So 5, 4, 3, 1, 3, 2, 1.
5 long seconds.
Yeah, 5 long seconds, right?
Oh, okay. So I'll just share my own screen.
This coming.
Because I think I got a message that she doesn't have my presentation, but that's fine. I'll just share my screen. Give me 1 second.
Maybe I give you 10. Okay, it's coming.
It's on.
Yeah.
Does everybody see my screen?
No, it's here. Good. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful.
Dr. Vishal, you can go ahead. Thanks.
So thank you, Sergi, for the time. So guys, I'm going to talk about a little bit of the network architecture and design challenges from a LEO perspective. And quickly, what I'll do is I'll talk about a taxonomy for LEO constellations and then dive into a little bit about what's unique about the network architecture for LEOs, and then some of the design issues that we have to address for the different types of LEO constellations. And then close off by talking about some of the learning from internet-based designs that Riad talked about, the last 20 years of learning that we can apply to LEO with some modifications, of course. So let me dive right in. So the key functions for LEO constellations really are 3. One is to integrate, the worldwide networking infrastructure. That's what one of the proposed sort of functions is. The other is to provide backbone connectivity for terrestrial systems and all kinds of terrestrial systems that we have heard about and will be hearing about, whether it's 5G or IoT or the wireline networks of today. And then to provide connectivity solutions where the infrastructure is infeasible. I mean, those are remote areas, very far-flung areas, or areas where simply providing any kind of connectivity is very cost prohibitive. any other way. And I want to break up the LEO taxonomy into three parts. One is what I call the broadband constellations, which are, in quotes, the internet and space types, which we hear about, the SpaceX, the OneWebs, and the Amazon Kuiper. And not only do they provide broadband, but they also have high bandwidth communication satellites themselves. You know, the throughputs of these constellations can be in the, satellites can be in the gigabits or tens of gigabits range. Constellation throughputs could be in terabits range. And the per user bandwidth is typically tens of megabits per second. That's what you're hoping to do. And you know, they have a whole set of challenges of their own. And then you have the narrowband constellations, the IoT and 5G centric guys that we heard about, you know, from Ramon just before me, and Adriano talked about the different kinds of CubeSats that could be used for satellites like this. Now, this is important because it's projected that by 2024, about 24 million IoT connections would be routed through these kinds of narrowband constellations. And I've given some examples here. You know, there are a bunch of startups, Sateliot, of course, Kepler, Lacuna Space, and Aleix. And there's Iridium Cloud Connect, but there are a few others. You know, Eutelsat announced that it will have its own low Earth orbit systems for IoT. And Yahsat from the Middle East, you know, partnered with a company called Astronaut, which is out of Switzerland, which is also doing, you know, narrowband IoT. And then, of course, there is the more advanced thought process of hybrid or multi-layered constellations, which are like mid-band, where you can have LEO, MEO, GEO, and some combination thereof. And the most sort of well-known is the Intelsat OneWeb Alliance, which was from 2015 to 2019. And actually Gogo, which provides, you know, aircraft Wi-Fi, you know, announced that it will be using this. And even though this is now sort of under litigation, but at least the basic ideas were well founded. And the idea was that you can have a terminal, a transmitter that's compatible with multiple networks, and you can do dynamic routing of traffic based on, you know, latency and throughput and the coverage that is available at a given point in time. So if you're at a high altitude or high latitudes where you're in the polar regions, you know, you can use the LEO systems. But if you're in the lower latitudes, you can use more MEO systems, which are easier to communicate with. And another sort of famous example is the Space Defense Agency of the US that announced last year that it's going to build a multi-level constellation where it's going to have, you know, a transport layer as the core. And on top of that, there's going to be a tracking layer and a custody layer to track different kind of military assets. And the tracking layer satellites will share some of their data with the transport layer satellites and so forth. So these ideas are sort of coming about. Now, the question is, you know, what are the network architecture challenges that are sort of unique to LEOs? And while there are many, I've listed a handful of them here that are common to all of the three types of the networks. One is the network topology. You know, it's usually a variation of some kind of a toroidal mesh, but it's affected by, you know, power constraints, the link budgets, and the orbital mechanics. You know, what planes you're in, what altitudes or latitudes you're going to be at, and so on. And these affect network performance and capacity in a very big way. And the other is the issue of routing, where you have two kinds of routing, one between the satellites and one between the terrestrial networks and the satellites. And that's a function of the network size, the number of nodes in the satellite constellation, the topology discontinuities that come because you have fast moving satellites that are moving in and out of base, you know, ground station coverage. And therefore you have varying satellite visibility and beam coverage. And, you know, this can be done in either a centralized or distributed way. And we'll talk more about how current internet, you know, techniques may be applicable here. And then, of course, there's the critical issue of delay or latency, which is extremely critical for application performance. And it's a function of multiple interrelated engineering design choices. For example, you know, the antenna design, the degree of margin you may have in your link budget, what kind of link layer retransmit strategies you have, what error control mechanisms you're using, and so on. And the links and the error characteristics vary with time due to the satellite's movements, and is also a function of the latitude at which the different satellites are. And so that becomes very critical when thinking about a network architecture. And finally, there's handover, which is you need that to transition coverage of ground terminals to other satellites as they move in and out, or to neighboring beams of a multi-beam satellite. And so what happens is that the path taken by traffic of a given flow varies over time. And as you can imagine, that has serious consequences for network performance. So then if we look at these, what are some of the key design issues that we want to address? Now, there can be a multitude of issues. I've just focused on 3 that I think are pretty important and are common to the different kind of constellations I talked about earlier. And so you have the control plane design. So you need to have some kind of mechanism to handle the routing and the delay and latency that arises because of that, and the on-off nature of the satellite communication because of orbital mechanics. And you need therefore an engine to compute, very critical primary and backup paths, to have redundancy solutions, and more importantly, transmit that to the various constellation members so they know what action to take, how to route traffic. Then there is the issue of handover. Here again, there are 2 things to worry about. In a LEO constellation, you'll have handovers within LEO satellites, and and you can have, of course, handovers across networks, by which I mean, across ground stations, across different types of layered networks, if we are using a LEO, MEO, GEO combination, and so on. Now, this gets complicated because in many cases, even though you can predict the movement of the satellites, you still have moving endpoints, ships, planes, military equipment, rail, transportation, and so on. And if you want to combine the satellite networks with 4G, 5G networks, which we've heard about and will hear about in the rest of the conference, then you need to accommodate the movement of the satellites, and that complicates things and also has an impact for capacity planning. Because ideally you might want to oversubscribe capacity, but that's very tricky to do in this kind of a scenario because you don't know when capacity requirements will change based on handover considerations. And then there is the issue of ground equipment design, which now has to handle hybrid networks. So, you need, ground stations that can maybe communicate with multiple types of satellites, LEO or MEO, for example, and they have to route traffic based on different criteria of coverage, latency, and throughput, which varies within a given constellation and also across constellations. So these performance criteria will impact both the design of the ground equipment and the protocols and the algorithms that go into how the ground equipment selects who to transmit to next. So the issue then is, all right, we have this bunch of problems and challenges. What can we do with what we have learned so far from our internet-based designs? And it turns out that there's a lot of knowledge from packet networking that can be applied. It needs to be modified, however. So there has been a lot of progress in software-defined networking in the last maybe 8 or 9 years since the early 2010s. And that can give us the opportunity to develop centralized controllers and orchestrators and take some of the learning that has already happened with sort of wireline and terrestrial networks and apply that to the satellite constellation networks. And now you have to meet the latency, topology, and routing needs I spoke about earlier. And what you also have to do is you also need operation support systems or billing systems that can ingest different kinds of data models, that can process those data models, and then spit out effective network management instructions or ways to instantiate service within the constellation. And this can be done, through a centralized controller, taking some of the knowledge from the software-defined world. And the other is, taking learnings from network function virtualization, which is a notion that you can use, common off-the-shelf hardware to design, and so with software control to design various kinds of systems. And we've already done that in the data center world and in the telco world. It can also be applied to LEO satellite design, where you can have COTS hardware with software control. And it can be applied to re-architecting ground stations, where you separate some of the hardware functionality from the software control. So you can have different kinds of hardware to interface with different networks that are very cost effective with COTS, but your control is software-based and common, and it can choose between the hardware depending on who you want to route your given traffic to based on a variety of performance criteria. And then there's the routing protocols. There's much we've learned in the internet about different routing protocols, interior and exterior gateway protocols, which will be required for inter-satellite routing and intra-satellite routing. And, depending on the different kinds of orbital planes in which the satellites are there. So we can leverage our experience with that. Now, of course, in the wireline world, you don't have the issues of moving satellites and moving endpoints and so forth. So those adaptations will have to be done. perhaps taking some lessons from the mobile world. And then we have learnings from things like segment routing and MPLS technology and Ethernet that can be adapted for data plane, and to decide, how the hardware, both at the satellite level, the ground station level, and the terrestrial network level, should forward the traffic in a way that is both cost effective and allows for things like quality of service and better application management. So that's really what I wanted to talk about. This is a very open field, as we all recognize based on what we've heard so far. So there's a lot of open issues that will be, designed and decided over the years. And to continue the discussion, we have a LinkedIn group that I just want to take 10 seconds to talk about. It's called Carrier Ethernet, but really we discuss issues of technology, strategy, and business that relate to modern packet networking. So there's a venue for you to go and have other discussions. And of course, I'm always available. My contact information is there for further communications on this. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Vishal. Thanks a lot for your presentation. So thank you. So now we will move to the next panelist, which is Aleix Megías from Open Cosmos. So we have had a change here in the agenda. So we welcome Aleix Megías, which is Vice President of Programs on a manufacturer. So welcome, Aleix. So you have your mic here, and let's see if your slides pump up.
Hello?
Yeah, we are almost. Good, so remember that after your session, we will have a couple, 3 minutes of questions. We have already received some texts on the Zoom. So if any one of you also wants to use this, but you will also have the micro in case you want to ask any question to the panelists. So let's see if it pops up. Yeah. Well, I'm coming from a 5G background, so I'm supposed to be very stressed because of the latency issues, so it's like waiting.
Maybe I can start.
So if you want to start and introduce yourself, so then we can jump on.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Well, thanks. First of all, thanks for inviting us. So I come to substitute Rafael Jordà, who's our CEO. So quickly to introduce ourselves. So my name is Aleix Megías. I'm the Vice President of Open Cosmos. We are a company that helps developing space missions. So we help companies deploy space infrastructure. And our previous panelists were talking about what are the challenges or activities that it takes to deploy networks and telecommunications based on satellite infrastructure. What we do is basically helping to put that satellite infrastructure up there, so then we can have all the communications networks on top of it. So I'm not sure we'll get the slide, but anyways, so I'll start maybe quickly giving an introduction. Open Cosmos was founded on the vision of simplifying access to space. So making something that is very complex, trying to simplify, so it opens the market to new companies that are not from what we used to call the old space or the old industry, where it used to be all these big contracts, super massive infrastructure projects that would take years and years and cost lots of money. So Open Cosmos was found with this vision, and basically we've been building tools and services based on nano satellites, so very small satellites that benefit from economies of scale of the reducing cost of launchers, as well as the miniaturization of the electronics technology that is used from off-the-shelf components, automotive industry, instead of going for radiation-hardened components like all the big satellite programs are. So in this sense, what we do is this, simplify access to space. So I wanted to talk a bit briefly on what it takes to put a satellite in space. Well, what is the process to put a satellite in space, and what are the different activities that a company or a group of companies have to go through to put that satellite in there, so then it can run basically communication services on top. Are we gonna get those slides?
Yeah,
or
I think that. Let's see.
Well,
yeah, you're doing very well.
I'll just go without slides. In the end, there's only one slide that I had where I had summarized all the points, so you can follow my explanation, but I'll go straight into it. So basically, when we start a satellite project or a satellite mission or constellation project, we always go through a first phase, which is the design phase, right? So we extract all the requirements from the customer. This comes from user requirements normally for telecommunication networks, where we're looking at parameters such as the throughput, the bandwidth, anything related to revisit time, latency to the network, to the core, everything that the previous panelists were talking about. So we would extract all these requirements, transform them into what are the system requirements, and then derive them into everything related to the infrastructure, the space infrastructure. And then we'd go through a process of basically designing all the different segments that consist a space mission. So this is, we could talk about the space segment. So this is everything related to the spacecraft. So the satellite that we'll put in orbit, including not only the spacecraft platform, which are all the systems that ensure that there's power, there's communications, to the payload, which is the real instrument. So the piece of technology that will help get those data, get that data from the ground to space and then to the ground again. And this basically conforms what we call the space segment, right? So we'll go through all this process of designing, selecting what are the different capabilities that the spacecraft have to have. And then we'll put in the context of a space mission. So this means selecting the orbit at which the satellite has to go. So the altitude, there you go.
Conclusion.
Well, I'll keep all the introduction. Let's go to the point.
Oh, maybe
so I was talking.
You only have one slide, maybe.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is just introduction on what we do to actually help access help simplify access to space, to basically do this. What happened with the computer industry, making it small to enable lots of applications. So we're doing the same with space missions, basically trying to make it very simple and very small and cost effective. So many different companies can deploy infrastructure and services on top of it. So that's an analogy that we always like using. And we have tools and platforms that simplify this process through the whole design of a space mission and process, so that we can impact any different sector. And here we can see quickly, well, oil and gas, microgravity, test in space, telecoms, Earth observation, and the list goes on and on. And the whole point at the end of this, getting your payload or your system, your service into orbit, so that can get you data and services. Yeah, and through this, basically, there's a series of tools that we have developed internally that help go through this process. But what I was starting to talk was about this. So the actual process on getting the stuff up in orbit. So designing this, I was talking about designing the space segment. So the orbit, the altitude, the inclination, all these things will define how often your satellite will pass over a specific region, over specific latitude and longitude. And we'll basically design these in accordance to the coverage that your network has to have, what regions on the Earth you plan to service, and how often you'll need the satellite or infrastructure to be on top of that area. As probably some of you know, like depending on the altitude, the satellite will pass faster over your point of view, or will stay for a longer time. In geostationary orbits, of course, the satellite is with respect to the sub-satellite point, which is the point on Earth, the satellite it's staying there, so it doesn't move, right? So that's why we have all these big satellites in geostationary covering different areas of the world. Now we're talking about LEO. Why are we talking LEO, low Earth orbit? It's because basically it's cheaper to put satellites in LEO than putting it in geostationary. And that's why all these new commercial wave of space is basically based on this low Earth orbit, because everything has to cost much less, so that all these new business models can emerge. So not only we design the space segment, but also the ground segment. So this is related to all the gateways and Earth stations, ground stations that will get all the data up and down from the satellite, and we will control the telemetry, telecommand, etc., etc. We'll work on the launch segment. This is the design, or the selection rather, of the launch vehicle that will put our satellite or our satellites in orbit. As you know, there's a number of launch vehicles and operators that are currently working, as well as there's many new players that are trying to get in the market, particularly with small launchers. So this is a very exciting scene to look at the moment, where we all hope that the cost is gonna go further down so that we can really democratize access to all this new infrastructure. So we'll work on that. And finally, the user segment. So user segment is basically everything that has been talked before in this session regarding terminals of the users, all the gateways, all the networking, how we store all the data, where we put the core, etc., etc. After this, well, they'll go into the actual manufacturing of the satellite and the payload. It'll go through all the testing phase. I've tried to put it in very simple terms, so for those that are not familiar with the sector, but basically it's all the manufacturing and testing, then the development of all the ground stations, so actually deploying that infrastructure in different areas of the earth that it will take. It doesn't only take to put the antenna, you need to have all the maintenance, the power, fiber lines to actually connect to the internet or to the users. Then we'll select the launch and all the interfacing, so mechanical interfaces, electrical interfaces, power interfaces of the spacecraft once it's sitting on top of the rocket. So that's something that also needs to be taken into account, as well as then all the operation center setup. So what it takes to actually have a constellation or a satellite in orbit is like, you know, having a railway infrastructure. You always need to be monitoring it, so make sure that always is alive and can give your SLA. Then there's a lot of work as well that is done in terms of regulatory. I know we'll have then a talk later that will probably touch a bit more on this point. But there's a lot of work that needs to be done to get a system up there. One of them is all the frequency filing. So all the frequencies that are to be used in the system, not only for the communication service, but also to command and control the spacecraft. All these need to be agreed at the international level with the international telecommunication unions and the national administrations. So this is work that also needs to be done as part of the overall infrastructure deployment. Launch and operating licensing. So under the outer space law that was signed, you know, when there was the space race, each national country, or some of them, have actually national laws deriving from that, and it sets a set of rules that if you want to launch a spacecraft or constellation in orbit, you need to adhere to, and hence you need to be compliant with these, and you need to apply for a license. Then things regarding export control, insurance, in many of the cases, some of them related to third-party liability insurance that is mandatory by law, and then finally. And one of the hot topics at the moment is space debris mitigation. So this is one of the things that we all need to take care of. I mean, space is getting very, very crowded, and the problem of space debris is definitely going to cause problems in the future. So there are laws in place or recommendations at international level that help us mitigate, you know, the rubbish that we leave up there, so that we can make sure that this is a sector or a environment that we can benefit from in the future. Then we launch the spacecraft into orbit, and there's everything related to the launch campaign, going to the launch pad, preparing the launcher, getting it into orbit, and finally running what we call the launch and early operations phase. So this is, you know, deploying your spacecraft solar panels, finding it in orbit with the ground stations, doing any, you know, orbit correction with if you have propulsion systems, and then after this, so all the system commissioning and exploitation of your commercial service. And finally, decommissioning it. So once the mission is over, then you need to make sure that those spacecraft in orbit are brought into a graveyard orbit, or are brought down into a re-entry to make sure that, as I was saying before, there's no rubbish left up there. And this would be rather standard for any type of space mission. Then when we talk about constellation, these things get even more complex, right? Apart from everything that we were talking before my speak, there's everything related to fleet management, of course, intersatellite link, orbit control. So how do you manage that spacecrafts are in relative positions in space, so that you guarantee you have a constant and revisit time over specific areas on the ground. Then system redundancy. So, you know, you've got spare spacecraft in orbit or on the ground, to make sure that if something fails in orbit, well, you can replenish it and your SLAs with customers are still maintained. And then other things related to demonstration. So launching first satellites and then deploying full constellation. This is just a sneak peek on what it takes to bring this into orbit, but it's much more complex than what I have explained here. One of the things we'll do later, actually, it's just a screenshot on some of the tools that we have at Open Cosmos. This is actually one for that helps the design of constellations in orbit. Danny will do at the end a workshop and we'll show some of the tools that we have. But yeah, this was really my contribution. So I hope it has helped. And if you have any questions, I'll be around later here. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Aleix. Thanks a lot. So you can sit down if you want. So good. So we have now finished the first session. So I would like to know whether you have any question. I think that maybe Riad has one question to the speakers. Well, you have the mic.
Actually, I think like we spent like some time looking at the different challenges and issues facing all these LEO constellations and the work being done over there. I think what's coming out of that is like, it's complex because it's very multidisciplinary and different things like being involved, and also from different like, areas of research, of building products, of regulation. Maybe the question for the speakers here, besides the issues themselves and the challenges that you highlighted, can you like give few words on what you think the right approach is in terms of, tackling these challenges? I mean, how to have all this like, different categories of like, researchers, product, business work together to tackle these challenges?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a rather general question, right? I think it really takes lots of effort and collaboration among different actors. So as I was just speaking about now, it takes many different stakeholders to get such systems and services up in orbit. It's not just the service operator or the manufacturer of the terminals or the antennas on the ground. Is actually, there's many different actors involved in deploying such infrastructure. And for this, it just takes lots of time. It will take lots of effort in communications, in actually aligning different companies and stakeholders, not only companies, also public entities, right? That will have to align all these. So I think best challenges, the best way to tackle these challenges is really keeping close collaboration with all these different entities, advancing a lot the work that needs to be done to get up in orbit, and then we'll need a lot of money, a lot of investment to back it. So I think these are the big challenges. And yeah.
Any more feedback from some of the speakers? It's general, but it's like, it's fundamental as well, because what I'm seeing overall is that you have a lot of people working on these questions, but they're still fairly isolated. I mean, this communication cross bodies is not there, yet, at least not the way it should be, in my opinion. Hence the question.
Yeah, only maybe to complement from the communication side, in addition to all the complexity that keeping aside all the infrastructure of the LEO constellation, so on, just focusing on the communications stuff, even the fact of adapting a protocol such as narrowband IoT for satellite transmission presents a lot of challenges, and different companies from chip vendors, kit manufacturers, satellite operators, all should cooperate together to try to bring these kind of things forward. So just focusing on the communications part.
Excellent, yeah. And I don't know if the ones remotely have heard the question and have some feedback to add. It's pretty hard like to basically talk to people who are not here, right? So, Vishal?
Unmute my, oh, sorry, I was not able to unmute myself. So Riad, just a very quick thing I just wanted to add is that while there is a lot of players and a lot of complications, I think what really needs to happen, at least from the network design aspects I was talking about, is that people need to still work in their own silos. I'm sorry to be saying that, but see, you can't tackle all the problems all at the same time, right? So you need to be aware of what's going on. You need to know where the funding is coming from, keep an ear out for that. But at the end of the day, every part of the puzzle has to work on solving the problems that they need to solve. I mean, the network engineering guys, network architecture guys have to develop those solutions, of course, aware of some of the cost constraints and the funding constraints and so on, maybe timing constraints. So you can layer your technology solutions. You can see what's coming down the line, take what is available today and use that, but with the eye to be able to modify that. So maybe more software centric control, more programmatic hardware, and so on. But at the end of the day, you need to focus on the problems that you are really focused on, while being aware laterally of what's going on. So I think that's the way to move forward, at least on the engineering domain.
Thank you. Yeah, well understood. I mean, it's basically both working in silos and working with everybody else at the same time.
Okay, good.
Okay,
so
thank you.
Thank you very much. So now I would like to also thank the speakers again, and we will move to the coffee break. So thank you very much.
Maybe to inform, yeah.
And thank you very much to the online speakers too. Working? Yeah, good. Perfect. So I think the people are online too. Okay, since many of the speakers on this session are here, I think that would be great if we can just all of them to come into the seats, and I will just going to calling each one of you. So we will welcome here, let me see, well, a member of my team, very proud to have you here, Dr. Puri Kodashinas. So welcome to the stairs. And we have Joan Adria Ruiz, please, welcome, Adria. We have also Dr. Juan Fernando Marchan. So welcome. And then we have Dr. Ana Pérez-Neira. I think that Ana, maybe they're still in the coffee. So, okay, Ana, you are welcome to join to the stage. Okay, good. So in order to start, so Puri, you are welcome to take the floor. You have the slides here. So thank you very much. Puri will be talking about orchestration systems and how we are able to merge and to interact between the terrestrial and the satellite ones. Thank you very much, Puri. Yeah, wait 1 second, sorry. People online are connected, right? Yeah? Perfect. Okay, thanks.
Is it working? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you very much for the introduction, for the invitation, and giving me the floor to present, let's say, some ideas that we learned over the past years working with some big players in the satellite domain like Thales, Airbus, Gilat, iDirect, both on the terrestrial, let's say, level, on the operational level, and then the satellite, let's say, manufacturing itself. So we've been lucky enough to be part of a project called Sat5G. And this project contributed around 200, let's say, different contribution to the 3GPP, let's say, standardization activities that we saw on the Ramon's presentation. So Nicolas Schubert was the technical manager of the project, and during these years, I learned a lot. So I'm going to focus on the, let's say, a level of complexity that we are seeing on the integration of satellite system with the terrestrial system, 5G systems, and the cloud system. So this is, I know satellite systems by themselves are complex, but let's try to tackle this new dimension of complexity. So as you can see, we are foreseeing, let's say, an evaluation, let's say a change on the communication systems. And basically 5G systems are coming to reality, and now by 2020, they are real. We are expecting to see a huge global impact on GDP by 2022. And basically the prediction says we are expecting to have around 5 trillion contributions on the global GDP just coming by 5G. So given that, we know that 5G is let's say, promising some basically KPIs. You can see here some of the KPIs that I listed. And of course, satellite, along with the other technology, should contribute to these KPIs for the lower latency, connectivity everywhere, higher security, and lower energy, let's say, consumption. This picture is a picture that we work in this project together, basically. And you can see this shows the benefit of using satellite. So there are some areas like urban areas or rural areas, you can have terrestrial networks, but there are some areas which are very remote, very isolated, and you cannot provide coverage unless you use satellite. Or there are some systems like the aviation systems that it makes sense to use satellite, different type of satellite to provide connectivity to those actions, basically. So we saw Ramon's presentation about 3GPP. So basically to conclude, you can see some main use cases that satellites come to play. There are backhauling system, the two, I don't know if it, okay, yeah. These two first ones show the backhauling system when the satellite feeds the 5G towers. And the other case is when the satellite directly talks with the user equipment. So this user equipment could be narrowband IoT systems or any other systems that you may need to communicate, like an airplane or a ship or other platforms. But now let's focus on LEO. When we talk about LEO, basically, we are talking about a specific type of satellite, let's say, system. There are satellite systems that are very close to the orbit, close to the Earth. Of course, they have some benefits like lower cost of launch or lower cost of, let's say, manufacturing, but we should not forget that there are a level of complexity like the management of inter-satellite connectivity that needs to be solved, and basically the routing as mentioned before. We are foreseeing some technologies that are coming to help all the satellite components, including LEO, to reduce cost, to become more flexible, and to become more, let's say, ready to interconnect with other terrestrial and cloud systems. One of these technologies is NFV, as mentioned in one of the talks before. This technology works on networking layer all the way up to the application layer. And the idea is like you are using some virtual machines to do some functionalities on a software layer for you instead of having a specific hardware for it. Second, let's say item is software-defined networking that can help you to program the network for routing purposes, for better control, so on and so forth, and edge computing that can help you to have computational elements next to the end user to have, let's say, applications. What we are offering basically here in our project and in our, let's say, office, basically, it's a terrestrial satellite resource coordination. This terrestrial resource coordination came to the reality after some discussion with these players, because we foresee that in the terrestrial ground segment, they are trying to use SDN and NFV technology to manage some resources. Basically, there are virtualization and software-defined networking happening in this layer, similar to the cloud system and similar to the terrestrial systems. And also, there are some, let's say, NFV and SDN happening between let's say, space segment control. And we figured out that there is a layer needed in order to coordinate an end-to-end service between the terrestrial system, cloud system, and this new virtualized, let's say, satellite system. So we work on this, let's say, technology, and we have it ready. Basically, we tested over 2 industrial, let's say, demonstrations. It's quite user-friendly because through a graphical user interface, you can work with the satellite system, cloud system, and terrestrial system. Basically, we are working yet with some other, let's say, partners like iDirect, like Airbus, to extend this solution and make it more enriched in terms of controlling, let's say, different levels. This is more or less what I wanted to explain. I don't know if I catch up with the time or.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you,
Okay.
Furia. Thanks a lot. Good, so we will jump now to the second speaker. And here we have Joan Ruiz. Welcome to the stage from the UPC. Okay, here you have your mic. Please get it close to your mouth, okay?
Okay,
good. So
let's see, we have the slides.
Change the slides. So Joan is PhD candidate for finishing already in the UPC, right?
Yes.
You will be talking about the latest research that become solutions too.
Exactly. So hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. Also, thank you all the organization for inviting us. I'm going to present what we have been working in the concept of Internet of Satellites, which is related on satellite to satellite communication. So also known as inter-satellite communications. Okay. So I think that this works. Yeah. So just I figured out everybody has been talking here about requirements, about the community needs. So what we identified at the very beginning is there is 2 big fields, 2 big communities, Earth observation and also broadband communications. In the Earth observation, what we have seen is that everybody's trying to measure, may have more measurements of the Earth. So what it did is that it increased a lot the amount of data that we are generating. So now the bottleneck of that is to download this data, how we can download this. And in the opposite side, the broadband communication, what is more interested is in the connectivity of this. So try to connect, as everybody has been saying, different parts of the area that are isolated. So at the end, what we can figure out is that there is different demanding requirements, low revisit time, real-time services, high downlink capacity, large coverage, and high availability. So if we follow the traditional strategy to design a constellation that Open Cosmos has started to present and present in more detail, just the idea is that you take the requirements and then you start to design the constellation, number of planes, number of satellites, and then you evaluate this. So at the end, if we take these demanding requirements, probably we're gonna reach a stage in which you have, or you need a lot of satellites, and in LEO, indeed. And probably you're gonna ask yourself if you need inter-satellite communications. Following this, you have the option that's already been presented, which is the mega constellation, or also called massive satellite constellations, which has a lot of number of satellites. Think about here are the numbers of 4,000, also targeting 12,000 of satellites in the SpaceX, and to provide global internet access. Here, although the architecture proposed achieve the requirements, as you can see in the picture, for example, that they say a round trip time close to the internet, there are other challenges that will be addressed in the follow section that needs to be considered also. It's like operation, for example. Now we have problems, or we have challenges to operate the Galileo constellation, how we are going to think about thousands of satellites, how you're going to operate those, how you're going to control the orbit of those satellites, how you're going to deploy it, how you're going to manufacture it in an efficient way. And also the coordination of the frequency, but also the satellite collisions. So also Open Cosmos highlighted is that if we are going to launch these massive or mega constellations, the space will be overpopulated. So the probability to collide this will be higher. So we need to control it. So one of the ideas that we have been working also, and there is other comps, is try to collaborate between them. So it's what it's called our distributed satellite systems. Here we have 4 examples of them. What the idea is to have different satellites that try to collaborate or to follow a same objective. For example, the satellite cluster, you have the same satellite, the same platform, multiplied, and you follow a trajectory. Then you have satellite swarm with the small satellites, for example, that use a big one to download data. Fractionated, that tries to fractionate the satellite in a small part. And the one that Adriano comes, for example, are already presented is the federated satellite system, in which you have different satellites with its own mission, totally autonomous, and then decide to collaborate to share unused resources. So this collaboration is interesting because you can optimize the resources. So follow this idea. What we think or what we believe that going to happen is that there are going to be different companies, entities that will launch its own satellite system, but this satellite system can be interconnected between them, okay, to achieve the requirements that we exposed previously. That will allow us to reduce the number, the constellation, the number of satellites in the constellation. But that poses another challenges. Heterogeneity, for example. Satellites from SpaceX are different from satellite from Telesat, for example. So big effort needs to be done in the standardization in this communication. See, okay. Also think about that this is quite close to the internet idea when you have autonomous systems that they interact between them. So here. So what we have working in the concept of Internet of Satellite, but one of the things is that we do not predefine the architecture of the satellites. So we are not working in a specific constellation planes and that stuff. We need to manage this situation when the satellites orbit around. So what it happens is that the mobility becomes crucial. So think about that currently we are working on users that move and the infrastructure remains stable. Here is in the opposite side. You have the infrastructure that moves also. So the satellite motion it means that the satellite is constantly moving. They follow an orbit, a trajectory, which is periodic, but also it can be predictable with some challenges, but can be predictable, and this can be useful. So I don't know if I can click. Well, this is a video, but I don't know who is seeing, but those links, for example, they are communication links. Due to satellite movement, those links can be connected or disconnected depending on the physical. So what it has is that at the end, these satellite connections will be sporadic and also has a lifetime. So see this figure with a 39 satellites example. You see this is the duration of the routes, and the 50% of those routes has a duration less than 10 seconds. So what it means is that in this context, the network is really dynamic. you're gonna change a lot. And those changes how can impact, mainly what is also presented is the network disruption. What is it, the network disruption? Indeed, you have a different nodes connected at certain moment. And after a while, this connection due to the mobility is changing, and you can have isolated parts of the network. And you cannot ensure that always there is a route between a source and a destination. How this impact? This impact for sure in the latencies, in the route availability, and also you need to think another strategies how to forward the data. And here is, for example, an example is using the store and forward. You have satellite A that want to communicate with satellite C. So what they have is to send the data to satellite B that the storage is over the time and then give it to C. So now we are talking about not only to define a route at certain moment, we are defining a route over the time. Sorry. So also other models of networks that has been used in this context of satellites, yeah, to define this disruption or this movement and also this dynamic of the network has been, for example, the virtual topology that defines a snapshot. A snapshot is a picture of the network with all the nodes and the connections. And when there is one connection that changes, a new snapshot is created. And this is suddenly done until you reach a period. This period is because the orbit, as I said, is periodic. So all the snapshots are periodic and you have a periodic sequence. Another option is what it was presented in Iridium, the first version, that is said, let's try to define an architecture that the mobility of the satellite impacts as less as possible. So we define a mesh topology in which each node knows its neighbors. And finally, also presented in and discussed in this section is the multi-layered satellite networks, which also is known about LEO and GEO communication, but in general concept. So using different layers at different altitudes, you can provide different view of the different communications and you can reduce the disruption in that case, but you're gonna have more latency in this. So as a summary of my presentation, yeah. The thing is that new requirements in appearing here, they are really demanding. So if we follow probably the typical constellation design, we are gonna arrive at certain point and we need a lot of satellites that could be challenging for other aspects that radar the architecture. But so what we promote is try to create collaboration between different entities, try to interconnect different satellite systems. But as you are not considering the architecture itself, they're gonna have disruption in the network that needs to be overcome with solution and standardization. Okay, so thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Juan. Thanks a lot for your presentation. Good. So we are good in time, so we'll move to the next speaker, which is Dr. Juan Fernando from the Catalan Cartographic Institute from Catalonia. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much.
Just wait a couple of seconds that the slides
let's
will
wait
pop
for
up.
the slides to go.
Thank you very much.
Of course.
Let me see.
It seems we are lucky.
Okay, good, perfect.
Oh yeah, perfect. Okay, thank you everyone for attending this session here today. This afternoon, I would like first to thanks to the organizing board for having us here today. Well, I'm Juan Fernando Marchán. I'm working in Institut Cartogràfic i Geològic de Catalunya. And today, what we would like to share with you is how we envision that the potential impact of small satellites, particularly in constellation architectures, will improve different Earth observation areas. So I know that many of the talks here are about communications, but we have already seen that Earth observation is also one of the important components. So let's go for it. So our experience comes from different sources. In fact, we have been providing operational Earth observation products and services for the past 20, 30 years. But not only that, we've also been generating added value information products to complement these Earth observations. And our Earth observation department has experience on a small satellite mission analysis and design between 2008, 2012. We were involved very much into that. And of course, since we are the official mapping agency for the Catalan territory, we have experience and sound knowledge on the specificities of the Catalan territory. And we are as well users of Copernicus data, mainly Sentinel-1 and Sentinel-2. And we are also active members of the Copernicus Academy. That means that we have coordination of academic activities and educational programs, both at university and high school levels. This is to say that the following discussion that I'm going to show you is based on this experience that we have. But since we here today, we are bound to have very small presentations, just 10 minutes, and I want to honor the time framework. I know these presentations will be available on the website, so feel free to browse through them and check all the application examples. Here I'm going to go through just a few of them, but there is much more information on the slide. So there we go. We move forward. So for instance, one of the application areas where we do have experience is might be light pollution, also rooftop materials. But let me talk, or urban climate, but let me talk, dwell a little bit more in urban green. We have photogrammetric cameras, so we can provide operational capacity to obtain green indexes at a pretty good spatial resolution, around 40 centimeters. However, as you might be aware, the operation of aircrafts is costly in terms of money, in terms of cost, and in terms of planification. That is to say, we cannot fly the aircraft every time we would like to. So there would be some areas where there is some seasonal variations or some phenological changes that would be present. And using aircraft, we won't be able to attend to capture these changes in such a way as we would like to in an optimal scenario. So the challenge in this sense would be this: to have ground sampling distances, that is spatial resolutions below 2-3 meters, and to be able to provide disruptive tools such as thermal behavior or urban modeling by combining with other geoinformation layers like thermal infrared or LiDAR data. But in this case, the contribution that we are thinking the small satellites, especially in a constellation architecture, will provide us would be a very positive one, because of the temporal and seasonal resolution that this constellation would provide for this kind of application. And it is our opinion that the current state of art for small satellite payloads already meets the requirements for such applications. So that would be a win-win scenario. Moving further on, we could also discuss a little bit more on solar potential or forest fires. As I said, feel free to browse through the slides by yourself. But let me talk again a little bit more about terrain deformation. At ICGC, we have, as a mapping agency, we have our own interferometric chain. That means that we are processing SAR data, especially for Sentinel-1 satellite, to monitor the movement at the millimetric scales of the soil, of the surface of the territory. However, this operational service that we are also having for our internal use has some limitations in terms of temporal coherence and ground truth limitation. This is to say, we would like, that would be the challenge to solve, to have more reactivity, to be able to improve the temporal resolution from which we are having currently images. Typically, you can have with Sentinel-1 images every 6 days, and with other platforms, maybe even 12 or 11 days. It would be better if we could have more reactivity, and also to complement this satellite data with on-ground actual deformation measurements, or with calibration data from active or passive corner reflectors. In this case, so far, as things are at this moment, we think that the contribution of small satellites won't be so great, especially because of the power budget of an active sensor such as radar from a very small satellite, a CubeSat we are talking in this sense. So that would be a no-go for the time being. But if we move further on, we won't discuss here forest status, but let's talk a little bit about precision farming, precision agriculture. In this sense, ICGC has more than 20 years of experience supporting the French Farmstar service led by Airbus to provide precision farming. We are using our photogrammetric and hyperspectral sensors and as well as our own aircrafts for that. But usually we also use Copernicus datasets to complement this airborne data. What we would like to have to improve our products in this area would be to have more red edge narrow bands, and also to extend our sensing capabilities to the shortwave infrared with better resolution than the one that Sentinel-2 has, which is around 10 to 20 meters, depending on the band. And this, we think, would allow to provide better agronomic models and improve the outcome of artificial intelligence algorithms. So here again, we think that the potential benefit of small satellite constellations would be quite a good one, because we would benefit from the better coverage and temporal resolution, and we would be able to sense the physical variables associated to this change in vegetation in a short time window. And again here, the current state of art of a small satellite fits the spectrality requirements for these applications. So let's see some more examples. We cannot discuss here today water bodies or urban 3D, but let's talk about natural hazards. This is like flooding or forests or fires. This is a very demanding area in terms of reactivity. When there is some event taking place, we need to have data as soon as possible. And as you might imagine, aircraft operation is limited by the weather conditions. But so it is the satellite data from optical sensors. If we're having a cloud coverage because there is a storm, like 2 weeks ago we had here in the Mediterranean area, the Gloria storm, that was quite disruptive. But there were no optical images from the day of the event because there were clouds. So the challenge here will be to have a good time to access and temporal spatial resolutions to be able to use this information in conjunction with some other sources of the information to provide a fully operational product that allows the decision makers to react in time. So here, taking into account small satellites, constellations provide us with this easy of access, this enhanced coverage, and this good reactivity. We think they will have a very positive impact in natural hazard monitoring and tracking. So let me see if we can change the slide. Having said that, based on all these scenarios, what I had time to say today here to you, and what you can also go through by yourself on the slides, we have some key considerations that we would like to share with you here today. And the first of them is that it seems quite a very basic thing to say, but it's true. It's important to first have in mind a problem to be solved, and then look for the most accurate and sustainable solution to turn the data into knowledge. And we also do strongly think that no application is fully valuable if we are using just a single source of data. And of course, another very important thing here is the calibration and validation to guarantee the integrity of these Earth observation products. And these calibration networks and additional geodata layers should be a key element of the in situ component of any satellite program. We believe that in the near future, one of the main challenges of Earth observation will be to support the sustainable development goals at both a local, a urban, and a territorial scale. So the multi-scale component would be important here. And of course, the small satellites are a new, well, not so new anymore, thanks goodness, but yeah, let's say a new vector for sensing the Earth. And as any other data capture approximation, it has its own trade-offs. And now I would like to share with you what we think in our experience as operational generators of geodata are these trade-offs.
1 minute.
1 minute, okay. So lower costs allow for constellation architectures, and we can have better revisit times and time to access than other Earth observation approaches. New players can develop their capabilities and assets in the new space sector and develop their own space program. We also have believe that these small satellites allow to demonstrate new scientific and technological approaches, and the existing technology in passive sensors optical passive sensors allow to provide already good services over such an heterogeneous territory as Catalonia. On the other hand, for a 3 to 12 unit scenario, the duty cycle and power budget constraints rule out so far, we think, active sensors or large coverages. And also there is a room for improvement in the power budget and off-pointing capabilities. This is important for urban environments. So let me get to the final slide. This is what we think would be a minimum viable product for a 6 to 12 unit small satellite, having 4 to 6 bands in the visible and near infrared regions, offering a spatial resolution below 4 meters and revisit times around 3-4 days for several application areas that we can see here: urban green, fire forests, land cover, land changes, application areas. And last but not least, I would like to say this proposed payload would benefit from complementary payloads such as L-band radiometers, GNSSR reflectometers, or radar altimeters. And that's it from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Juan. Good. Thank you. Okay, good. So as you said, last but not least, so we have Dr. Ana Pérez-Neira from the CTE-UPC, a good colleague of mine too. So here, the floor is yours. Again, just a few seconds for the slides. So you will be talking about how we are able to put maybe a base station up there, right?
Yeah, the challenge.
At least so how we try to do it.
It's a challenge.
Good.
I have to say that from the very beginning.
Okay, perfect. Very much welcome.
Yeah.
Good. So let's see if it comes. Pop up. Yeah, it is. Yeah, good. Here you are. Thank you.
So welcome, everyone. As I was commenting to Sergi and to all of you, it's a presentation about the challenge of having base stations on the satellite. And I'm going to focus the whole thing on physical and access layer for the non-geo. So I have to wait for that. Yeah. So as it has been commented in the previous talk, so 3GPP and the industry associations have highlighted the importance of the satellite to come into the whole 5G ecosystem, because there are different use cases to cover. The wide coverage is just for the satellite, the connectivity in rural, isolated areas, maritime, the fast deployment whenever the terrestrial network falls down because there is some disaster or some emergency response is needed, the complementary network because also the terrestrial network fails or the traffic, there is traffic congestion, and communications on the move for high-speed aircraft, high-speed trains, vehicles on the countryside. So this is quite clear. The verticals are the growing machine-to-machine and IoT market is claiming that there must be a niche in fleet monitoring, ship cargo, logistics, infrastructure in general, monitoring oil pipes, digital satellite twins, that would be a little bit more advanced, or agri-robots, right? And what if, on the top of these emergent needs, we had base stations, more or less intelligence, more or less basic, mounted on the satellite? Then we would have, in fact, lower delay, which is something that is requested for the satellite, in general for all communications, and we will have always lower cost for the whole network and more sustainability, at least for the terrestrial network. So the benchmark or the state of art is the satellite just as a backhaul network connecting to ground-based stations. There are also current systems that the user terminal is connecting directly to satellite, but then the satellite goes to the ground, the G-Node B. And the ideal thing would be to have the G-Node B on the satellite, because in this way, the round-trip delay is just half, as I was commenting to you, and also the whole sustainability, the carbon footprint, for instance, all these things that are really an important thing for the terrestrial network would be much more solved. So there are other components also to take into account if we manage the whole thing like that. Let's see what are the impairments, what are the difficulties to implement this. We have as a benchmark or architecture, basic architecture would be a LEO, under 6 gigahertz, L-band, as it was commented, for instance, it's one of the IoT bands for sensing different things, and the impairments that pop up very physical layer, we have a very narrow visibility window, we have delay, big delay, we have higher Doppler than the terrestrial, and higher path loss, and all of them are time varying. So we have to be able to cope with that. I'm going to go one by one, short, fast, but trying to pop up how can we solve or how can we manage some of them. The delay is really big when compared to terrestrial. So round trip delay is twice the one-way propagation delay, which is from the user terminal to the satellite to the ground station. For GEO, the round trip delay is 500 milliseconds. For LEO, is 1 order of magnitude less, it's 50. So that is the good news for LEO. If we have a round or some intelligence on the satellite, then this go to half the time. But even that 20 milliseconds is high when compared to the delays on the terrestrial networks, which are for LTE were less than 1 millisecond in a cell of radius 100 kilometers. And for new radio was 2 milliseconds because the radius of the cell increased. So how can we cope with this big delay? We can have some measurement to a central point, a reference point in the cell, and this will be a fixed delay that we can somehow predict and we can counteract more or less easily. And then we have a differential, in this way, we have a differential delay, which will amount also to 2 milliseconds if the coverage of the satellite, of the LEO satellite is of 300 kilometers. So it will be competitive with the terrestrial networks. And we could use time advanced techniques and with terrestrial networks. So that's fine. Delay may be not so an issue if we can have these applications that can cope with these 2 milliseconds or in this order of magnitude delay. Doppler is much more intricate because we have this relative movement of the user terminal and the satellite. And there are carrier frequency offsets that we have to estimate that are much bigger than in the terrestrial segment. So here you have, for instance, some example. In this plot is the varying Doppler, so the frequency carrier offset. So I have a nominal frequency, but this is varying an offset. And this is the time variation of this offset, which depends very much on the altitude of my LEO system. The more I see, the more time I see my LEO, the more variations of my Doppler. And these variations can add up to 2 kilohertz. For terrestrial systems, even for high-speed train communications, is below 500 hertz. So it's higher, right? And we have to do different things. So we have to look for new synchronization algorithms, and we have to also look for new waveforms. So whenever in this new radio saying welcome to the satellite, we have to think that the waveform is going to be that of the new radio in terrestrial segment. So this can come, or this can bring some problems. To show you a little bit which kind of, what I am talking about, here you have, this is an example of possible waveforms. So the blue one is the one that is used in new radio. It's a multi-carrier frequency, so FDM. And up the red one is an improved waveform. It's also multi-carrier, but it's filter bank, which comparing these two plots, at least there is much more frequency confinement. So there is less interference from the red one. But I was talking about Doppler. If we look at the Doppler, you have these two other plots. The narrow peak is the one with the new radio waveform. So this is very sensitive to carrier offsets, to Doppler. It doesn't tolerate that much. The broader the beam, the more robust is the waveform to this kind of Doppler. And this is what I wanted to tell you. We have to think of new waveforms in this, for these different scenarios. Also, synchronization algorithms are much more complicated, or you have to think them twice when compared to the terrestrial system. Here you have what kind of gains. So this system is detection probability. I am a device, terrestrial device. I want to access my satellite. So the probability that that satellite doesn't see me, the misdetection probability, can change very much whether we use the new radio, the waveform, or we try to devise a better new waveform, right? So we have to think that from the very beginning. when I say from the very beginning, it is also because this is not only for the current data transaction, but for the access. So at the very beginning, when one user wants to access the satellite with the base station, the red arrow, the user is sending some beacon. This beacon has to be detected. And here is where the problems that I have commented to you come, right? Also, with this slide, I want to show you that the access protocol has to be thought twice when compared to the new radio access protocol for any terrestrial device. In the sense that if it's IoT, this means that there are one request of access window, then some dialogue between the base station, okay, you can access, I give you this frequency, or I give you this time slot, and then the transmission begins. So it takes time. And if it's a satellite that you are talking to, all these windows are 20 milliseconds and 20 milliseconds. So this cannot be like that. So research also on how to access has to be done there. This is the regular granted access. The base station has to grant you access. For IoT and satellite is much more appropriate. The research right now is on grant-free asynchronous access. So this is just the protocol. Look, the request for access and the data goes all in at the same time. That means that the receiver on the ground, the base station has to be able to resolve collisions in a more sophisticated way that the usual ground terrestrial base station is doing in order to shorten times. Shorten times, live battery can be longer because there is a reduced protocol here. So these kind of things are what is currently being researched for IoT satellite. So that was the very basic things that I wanted to comment to you, in the sense that non-geo really for physical and Mac is in general a problem. And let aside if I go to nano satellite, that this would be even more difficult because there are less intelligence on the satellite. And the physical and the access has to be take into account all these grant access schemes, collision resolution at the receiver, okay? Then I commented at the beginning, the challenge of flying base stations. Why the challenge? Because that could help if we put some of this intelligence on the satellite, that could help to reduce delays and economy in the whole network structure, and that would help a lot maybe to find a good business or a good business opportunity. So that was my talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anna. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for your speech. So I hand over to Riad that may ask some questions to the speakers.
Yeah, thank you to all the speakers here. It's a very diverse set of topics, and we have a very short amount of time here. So maybe I will just pick one question and you will each one answer it from your own perspective and field of study, right? Maybe the question is, you're doing many things here and you're trying to achieve specific goals, but what would be the one thing that would help you the most achieving your goals, besides budgets and money, obviously, right? Please, but very briefly, just pick one thing out of all the things. It's is it interaction with the businesses, working with startups, having private, public, whatever would help you the most. Maybe start here, then go there, or start whoever want to start really.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the most important, let's say, question that could help me to, let's say, work better in this field is are we really going to position, let's say, satellites, especially LEOs, as a competitor to terrestrial networks, or we want to position it as a complementary system, as a network of networks next to the big 5G, let's say, ecosystem? And how is the role of the SMEs and the small players in the LEO ecosystem where can take the advantage of both terrestrial systems and these new emerging LEO markets?
Okay, thank you.
I think that from our point of view, being generators of Earth observation information, one of the most important things is, as I said, to have an application in mind and try to make it application driven, not technology push. So see how the technology can help us, but not the other way around, have the technology and just try it to fit to some existing application.
Okay, thank you.
So from my point of view, in the aspect of satellite-to-satellite communications, one of the points that has been improved now is the standardization. That is quite a big effort that we need to do. And also think about the connectivity, which is also another resource that normally is not here. Everybody thinks that it's connected, but they're not. So probably one of the standardizations should improve the connectivity between the satellites to reduce the disruption.
Okay.
Being able to talk to the big operators more face-to-face, more openly. That
Anyone
would
in the room
help in
here?
general. That would help.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Oh, let me add something to bring venture capitals here also that put money and make things easier. By the way.
All right, I think we move into the next session. Right? Moving to the next session now?
Yes, we
okay.
move forward.
Directly,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, speakers. Yeah.
We are in time. Okay, so now we will move now to the last session of speakers before we have the hands-on workshop. So here I would I think that we have only one present speaker, which will be the first one. So I welcome here Rafael Arillo, which is a law specialist on issues related to regulation and challenges on LEO constellations. So since you are the only one online, so you can start, and the next ones will follow on the line service. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, all the people. Well, when we're talking about regulation, a legal question, all the people say, well, you are engineers, we're preparing another things. This is not a clear situation. It's very important to thinking about nothing talking about legal situation, we're talking about Apollo era. What's different paradigm? The situation now is they are a new actors inside of the space business. There are a lot of companies, different new players, countries that make a lot of activities, and all the rules, they change. This is the key for to have a new legal situation. This is the essential questions. We are talking about LEO. Obviously, they are a general situation about technical position, but now the most important is that the LEO is an economical zone. Charles Bolden, the older NASA administrator, explained some years ago that they changed the situation. The big agencies like NASA, ESA, Russian Roscosmos, they explore the solar system. At the LEO is for private actions for develop economical situation. This is the key for to have more and more new players inside. These have a different elements. We need access with a lot of launchers of different companies that give service to the companies to like to go to the space. Also, they are the problem of the occupations of the LEO. Space is big, but we are talking about a lot of satellites, and when we're talking specifically about constellations, we're talking no 1 or 200,000 of satellites in the LEO. They have a very important impact in the different aspects and also need to make a lot of regulatory challenges. Talking about access, well, actually there are a lot of different launchers of different capabilities, and when we're talking about launchers, you need to license for to launch. We need to have contracts for to put all satellites or all constellation inside of the launchers. We need also to follow the obligation of register, do the liability that we have when we put in the space a satellite of a constellation. This is very important because when we are talking about a business, they are insurance companies, they are liability. Liability is from a state, and the state have the capability to ask you about your situation. And the second question is the occupation of the LEO. We can make two different schemes of occupation. First one, communications. For have satellites in LEO, we need to have authorization for communications, E2 system, a lot of band occupancy. And the second one is the physical occupation of the orbit. This is very important because one of the most important questions now in the regulatory system is the space debris situation. We need to have very careful because when we're talking about only to put one satellite in orbit, it should be very different if we like to put 12,000 satellites in orbit and occupy a lot of space. This should be an important regulatory challenger for us. Constellation, well, obviously all the engineers know perfectly what is the situation. They have a group of satellites working together like a system. This is legal relevant because they are a lot of relevant situation for no one satellites, for all the constellation, and they are different typology and example. The impact of the constellation in the legal question is very important because they have three important points. First one, the economic. What is the situation of the constellation about the economy in the space? There are different studies that talking that, okay, there are a lot of companies like SpaceX, Amazon, OneWeb that put constellation in the space, but they are clients for all these systems. What is the economical repercussion about the situation? Second one, political impact. With the new capabilities to launch and the new systems of little satellites, there are more and more players with capability to put in orbit. And this should be very important because they are not only big companies, big countries with this capability, universities, private companies, a lot of different countries can have this possibility to put constellation in orbit for different utilizations. And finally and centrally, we're talking about the legal regulatory impact. What is the challenges? Okay, the first is, what is the actual regulation? The problem is that traditionally, when we're talking about the space law, there are only 5 big treaties that talking about general question in the Cold War and don't about a specific situation that now have in the table. The second time is each country, they are now developing national law following or not the big treaties for to have some regulation for license, insurance, and liability. This is the controversial between the old space that working with some countries, big space agencies, and also the new space when a lot of new agents, they are working in space. They are also the difference between a vision of multilateral access to the legal questions, the treaties, and the unilateral vision, like is made now, the United States, Luxembourg, or some countries, they have a specific regulation for make space activities without to have agreements with another countries, but they are changing in the line to have this agreement about. What is the national situation here? Well, here we are signature of the 4 of the 5 big treaties. They are only a registered regulation. This is very important because should be in relation with the liability of the national companies to have a satellite of constellation in the space. And the question, if it's necessary to have a national regulation. Well, in this case, all the countries of the total environment have these national regulations. And this is very important because it's not only for to have some rules for to make launchers, to have a satellite in orbit. It's very important for to promote, for develop the industry. And this is important for different kind of administration. It's very important when we're talking about what is the challenges of the regulation, the paper of the administration for to give the support of all the companies that like to go to the space to develop different business. Because without licensing, authorization, and support, including tax support and different tools for go ahead, should be more difficult. It's very important to know that, for example, in the case of the USA, the regulations was established only a few points for to give license and authority to the companies. And this is the reason that the most great number of companies now they are developing in the United States. Fortunately, the rest of the world, they are following this line, and more countries, they have developed in this law in different range of activities for to promote the space activity. Should be a bad question if a regulation is only a list of points for to do. No, regulation need to be a list of helping to the companies for go ahead. And obviously one of the another important thing is that it's necessary in the administration to have entities for coordinate that when the companies have interest to go to the space, obviously need to know what is the interlocutor for to have all the license of the question, and the people that working in space is working and centering in a space question, and to have very easy the legal and the administrative question. This should be the most interesting question about the legal regulation challenges. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So we might have to apologize Nick Redov, but he was flying from US to Dubai, and he was supposed to connect us as soon as he was landing, so he has not yet arrived, which means that we will jump into the next speaker. Anyway, you will have the slides later on, so we will distribute all the presentations, so you will be able to see his point of view about the challenges that are behind also the law. So next speaker is going to be Dion Jerling. He will talk about LEO opportunities, which is from the point of view of the Africa demand. So let's see, he's online. Are you here already, Dion?
Hi there, guys. Yes, I am.
Yeah.
Can you hear me all right?
But I cannot hear you yet.
Oh, you can't hear me, okay.
Let's see if we can unmute you. Yeah.
Okay, can you hear me?
Okay, perfect, we can hear you. Good,
Okay,
so the floor
great.
is yours. Thank you very much. So you can get the control of the slides. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, well, thanks everybody. So I'm going to bring a slightly different perspective from the demand side for the new satellite ecosystems that are emerging really quickly. And I'm going to present a case why Africa offers the best return on investment for the satellite ecosystem. So if we look at a reason to invest, the call to investment, and how to invest, I'll touch on each of those. So I want to bring two key, I suppose, elements into perspective here. And I'm looking at a macro 30-year period, 2020 to 2050. And I want to focus on an asset the world doesn't know it has yet, which is African youth, linked to a time bomb that the world is facing, a global pensions deficit, and how satellite connectivity is a way to rapidly address this. And then also touch on a number of the myriad, not just a number, but there's a myriad of investment opportunities within the satellite ecosystem, from the end user all the way through to the satellite itself. So if we look at Africa's youth bulge, as they call it, we can expect a youth volume of 500 million. That's 500 million youngsters, 14 to 24 years old by 2050. That's a significant number of young people. Just imagine if they were all uninformed, angry, unengaged. We can see the beginnings of that already happening in the immigration issues that are going on around the world, the rise of the far right and all the rest. But just imagine the opposite. 500 million engaged, contributing and informed youngsters who are adding to the world economy, a tremendous asset. Then we look at why would these kids be a particular asset? This pension savings deficit is expected to be upwards of $400 trillion by 2050. That, just to put in perspective again, is if you look at global GDP in 2019, was around $87 trillion. We're looking at nearly 5 times the volume of global GDP just in pension savings shortfall. This is because the world is getting older and technically it's getting bankrupt. But how do you address that? An aging population, you've got yourself an asset that could actually do something about this. So if we look at a graphical sort of interpretation of why Africa sits in such a prime position to be able to address this issue, that number at the top, 5% of Africans will be over 65 years old in 2050, only 5%. And that's, you know, if you actually think about that, it's quite a significant statement. Europe is looking at nearly a third or just over a third. The USA is just about a quarter will be over 65 in 2050. But that's a beautiful graphical representation as to what Africa has to offer the planet and humans as a whole in terms of a return on investment. And this is really where, how do we empower these youngsters to be able to contribute and make this contribution that the world needs so badly? So it's these African youth make Africa technically with $500 million, the richest continent on earth. We all know its mineral value, its agricultural value. Innovation is strong in Africa. If you look at the mobile sector, I think a lot of the innovative developments have come out of the African mobile sector. Similarly with financial services.
The guy from Senegal and another guy from Rwanda.
It's one of the leading financial services markets in the world. It's also the least developed, which means there's opportunity. And unlike 100 years ago or the previous 2 centuries, we can look at opportunity in an undeveloped region in a different way for the greater good. Well, in our case, it's for our own good, the good of humanity. As we have an aging population, so these youngsters can come in and fill that space. For socioeconomic profit, not just economic profit. These days in impact investment, investing for a greater good is very much top of many investors' portfolios. And of course, as I say, for our own survival. The development that is required, however, is significant. The World Bank is talking about if we're going to achieve universal and affordable internet access for Africa, you're going to be looking at an investment of upwards of 100 billion by 2030. So, and that is really the fastest way in which we are going to be able to empower these youngsters, and which is universal internet access. So by providing universal internet access, a lot has been done already in terms of mobile coverage. The GSMA talk about 70% of Africa's population is covered. But there's a very interesting statistic, which is that red line in the middle. And that's what they call the usage gap. That's where people have access to coverage, but they don't use it. The reason why is the data is switched off. It's too expensive. It just cannot make those funds, don't have those funds available to be able to afford the data. So that is a tremendous, if you look at it, you're looking at 46% in 2018 who are not actually accessing the internet. And then of course there's the remaining 30% who don't have any access at all. This is the gap that the satellite industry can really come in. The 30% that are unconnected, primarily rural, satellite provides that coverage, which is useful. The 46%, this is where your LEO constellations will come in and start pressing the costs of internet access and data downwards. So that investment gap is very clear. So when you look at the picture as a whole, 70% of the population might be covered, but only 25% is being utilized. The business models that we're looking at for universal or ubiquitous internet access is going to require some innovation. You're going to need to look at freemium, premium type models. Free in terms of those at the entry level who can at least access the internet in some way. Freemium, as they get more used to it, as the demand for it increases, there will be some form of engagement or some form of part payment or sponsorship in order to be able to access a slightly better and less intrusive internet access. And then of course there's the standard premium, which we in the West are all used to. We pay top whack for an uninterrupted super fast internet connection. You combine 5G, you combine the LEO constellations, and you are looking at capacity that is going to facilitate this quite effectively. If you look at all of the technologies out there, mobile has broken ground. We're looking at getting faster services, but essentially it's satellite coverage that is offering the best and ubiquitous sort of coverage solutions. And when you look at how that is actually going to work, there's going to be a link between the satellite bandwidth and the terrestrial networks down below. And those are going to be the links to the end user. And this is where the investment opportunities are really going to come to the fore. So if we just give a very quick summary of some of the linked investment opportunities that investors and the industry itself can get involved with, is in the user experience itself. There are content management systems that need building. There are portals, captive portals, general internet portals that need building. Media and advertising models. They've proven really effective in the West, but there is room for change in Africa, which has a very different user experience. You've got app development as an example. The user journey itself, the actual services, the access to the data, the apps, learning platforms, entertainment platforms, information, sports, news. These are all areas in which investment can be placed. Access to devices, vendors, financial services. Financial services is one of the fastest growing businesses in Africa. The majority of Africans are not banked. For good reason in many cases, but this is changing. Mobile money, for example, is coming in, and as people get used to that, they are going to start wanting to look at a more traditional banking service which provides loans, insurances, and so on. And you can take it right down to local community centers in the field. These are currently, usually they're socially driven or they're charitable, but there's definitely an opportunity for these to be commercially managed. Then there's the access to media, the broadcasters, education, health, agribusiness, local content development, production, all offering areas for investment. The access to the data, as I mentioned, the free, freemium, premium models, the operator networks themselves, of course. There's the ISPs, the WISPs, the MNOs, microwave networks. TV white space is one that's being explored at the moment. An endless variety of ways in which operators can reach the end user. And then, of course, one of the more interesting ones, which probably some of the more technical and the satellite networks themselves will be interested in, is in the infracodes. The tower codes, for example, own most of the mobile phone network tower infrastructure across Africa. These guys are essentially a high site reaching the end user, and there is tremendous scope for investment in providing that link between the end user and the satellite itself. The cable codes, you're looking at 7, 8 undersea cables that are now surrounding Africa, and linked to all of that are data centers, microcenters. You're looking at major macro data centers. There's a tremendous opportunity there too. So in all, you're looking at an ecosystem in Africa that is presenting a huge global opportunity, not just for a decent economic return on investment, but also a socio-economic and solution for the rest, for us as humans going forward over the next 30 years. And I'd like to leave you with some sort of sound reasoning. You know, there's the standard approach that the World Bank has taken, in that you're looking at, you know, percentage point bumps on GDP if people are connected, 1.48% in Africa, for example. But two comments that I heard literally in the last 2 days. One from Tim Morris, who's a veteran ambassador in some of the more challenging African countries. And he makes it very clear that the future of Africa is going to be built by Africans. Somebody needs to understand Africa in order to be able to advise investors exactly where to go within this ecosystem and how to make it work. There are the economies that are already happening. 4 to 6 of African countries are the fastest growing economies in the world. And then I'll sort of finish with Mark Floorman, who advises many governments around the world. He is a great fan of African youth, and demographically, Africa is the future, the source of our young people, labor, innovation, and growth. It's not the other, it is us, and we should look after our own. So Africa is ready for investment. It's ready for these satellites, and the best place, I believe, that the LEO constellations and the incumbents can expand their services. Thank you.
Thank you, Dion. So good. We'll jump to the next speaker. So we are on time, which is good. So again, he's a local person, but he's abroad. So I welcome Jaume Sampere. Jaume is the CEO of Sateliot that has been already commented here before. So welcome, Jaume. Do you hear me? I can see you, but I don't know whether you hear me.
Yes, I hear you.
Not yet. Let me see. We unmute you. Can you say something,
yes,
please?
Yes, I'm here.
Good. Perfect. Perfect. Okay. Good. So welcome. So let's see if we can switch the, okay, just a few seconds. Okay, perfect. So you can see the slides. I think that now you will get the control. Okay, perfect. So thank you very much, Jaume. So the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon. I'm Jaume Sampere, CEO of Sateliot. I'm going to explain you what we do inside Sateliot, this new startup on the space, on the LEO constellations. Sorry about the noise, background noise. Okay, I'm in the airport, and maybe it's disturbing the general presentation. Okay. Let's start talking about the opportunity that we are facing. By 2025, okay, we 27 billion of connected objects in the world. Okay, independing who we are talking, there could go up to 75 million if we listen to Intel, but it doesn't matter really how many of those will be there. Okay, what we know is that around 90% of the planet doesn't have mobile connectivity. Okay, and on those 5% on the rest of the world.
Okay, Jaume, let's wait. Let's wait a few seconds that they announce the gate, and then we can continue.
Okay.
Don't worry.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, go ahead. Just because it was difficult to understand you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Sergi.
You can repeat, sorry, but you can repeat the last minute speech.
Okay, thanks. By 2025, okay, it will be 27 billion of connected objects in the world. Okay, we are talking about objects everywhere, but we have to be aware that just 90% of the world, or just 10% of the world has mobile coverage. The rest have nothing. Okay, then on those 90% that has no mobile coverage, okay, it will be around 5% of the connected objects of these billions of connected objects. We are talking about a global market of $5.9 billion, okay, in sectors like the ones that you see on the screen, okay, maritime, agriculture, oil and gas, green energy, outdoor sports, etc., okay. Then let me go to the next slide. Perfect. Okay. The current situation, okay, that the world of the telecommunications world that I have seen till now, the mobile operators and the satellite operators are two different worlds, okay? All the mobile operators, they have no satellites, okay? And all the satellite operators, they have no mobiles. Frequencies, technologies, providers, and operators, okay, are in a different and completely isolated one to the other, okay? You have to choose, okay, if you want to be a 5G user or a satellite terminal. Once you choose, okay, you cannot interact with the other part. If you go to the next slide, But there are some game changers. One of those is the one that you are talking today. It is interesting presentations you are having, okay? LEO constellations versus the GEO satellites market with entry barriers due to the positions that are limited. Nano satellites versus big satellites. We are talking about an average of 20 kilos in a satellite versus more than 1,000 kilos in the usual satellite, GEO satellites, the micro-launchers and dispensers, and the CubeSat pre-design that allows to design a satellite in less than a year versus 7 years that needs satellite, 5 to 7 years, okay, that needs the usual GEO satellite. All this is changing the market, and we are using all these things, okay, to do the things differently for what we have done till today. Next slide. Then, what's our business model? Sateliot is based on a constellation of nano satellites working as a cell tower from space. Sateliot, we are a telco, a telecommunications operator for IoT, not for broadband, not for mobile, just for those small messengers that send things connected all around the world that are out of coverage. This is very important, okay? Mobile, it's is very efficient on high density places, and satellite, it's very efficient on large coverage, okay? Then we cover the ones that are out of coverage of the mobile operator. And we offer them, the mobile operators, an extended coverage service in a seamless mode to this mobile globally. Our customers will be the telcos, the telecom mobile operators like Verizon, Movistar, Docomo, or Claro, all around the world, and they will give service to the customers, allowing them to extend the service to the rest of the out of coverage surface. If we go to the next. Then, as we are doing it in 5G, okay, exactly the same standard that mobile operators are using, what we are doing is just like a roaming service of the customers, allowing this in a seamless mode to connect to our satellite. We will take the message and we will pass it directly to the mobile operators. This will be a seamless service in order that the customer does not know if it's connected to a tower, to a base station tower, or to a LEO satellite. This allows us to use all the economy of scale of the equipment, and at the same time, okay, to have customers all around the world going through this B2B business. Next slide. We have done it before, okay? Of course, this is a race. This is a huge challenge because we want to be global. We want to be leader in this market. And what we say, okay, that in our team, there are people all around the world, okay, that have do it before in different markets, okay? In technology, okay, we did the first 3.5 gigahertz spectrum, network in Europe. That is the 5G spectrum. We deployed the largest Wi-Fi airport with the brand name Kubi, that it covers all Spain, but also Panama, Lima, Bogota. We deployed the first high throughput satellite in Europe with Hispasat. In terms of finance or money, okay, we raised more than 100 million euros of funds on all the last startups, okay, but mainly on the last one. We've taken more than 50 million euros in public funds and issued more than 50 million euros in debt in the public markets of Luxembourg. And we did an IPO in the secondary market of Spain. In market, we grow internationally in more than 25 markets in Europe, Africa, Middle East, and America. And I myself have started more than 10 startups. We deploy the largest satellite operator in Africa with more than 5,000 schools connected in Morocco. And we went in 2010 to 2016 to 150 million euros turnover to a high growth. And last but not least, okay, regulation. We and our team, okay, we have people that have done successfully frequency coordination in GEO, in Hispasat, and on GEO in Teledesic. Then we have experience in all the 4 different challenges that we have in front of us. Next. What we have already done, of course, we incorporate the company. This is a new company, but it was incorporated in 2018. We have done a small capital increase of 2 million euros. We are now facing a Series A. We designed the 5G satellite roadmap and the payload specifications. And we are about to announce that we will have our first satellite by the late August 2020, this year. And the second one in December this year. Okay. A unique position, of course, apart from the Spanish media, which is something that we are very proud of. Okay, South Korea have given us a reward as one of 25 startups in the world, inviting us to go there and to deal with the ecosystem, with the technological ecosystem. We signed an agreement with the European Space Agency, a technological agreement to develop together the 5G startup. And this last month, okay, we were very happy to know, okay, that Satellite 2020 has selected one of the 10 most innovative startups presenting on the startup space next March. All this, it's helping us, okay, to be on a very special position, on a very special moment. The newer space, it's completely open to newcomers as we are, because we are not a space people, we are more telecom people, market people, okay? And we are sure, okay, that this position, with the help of other partners, will position us as a leader in the IoT satellite market. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jaume. Really appreciate it. Good. Good luck with the challenge, by the way. Okay. Now we have our next speaker, which is also from abroad. He's Luke Maloney. I don't know if he can hear us. He's from a space fund, from a venture capital too. So he will explain around space internet and venture capitals and which is the relationship and what's the situation nowadays. So Luke, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
You see?
You can hear me?
I have a different screen here so I can see the people. It seems that, yeah.
All right.
Good. This time we have first the slides and second will come the speaker, which is good.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
Let me see.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah, are you here? Okay,
Ready to go?
Welcome.
Okay.
Good. The floor is yours. I think that you already have the control, right, of the slides?
Yes, I think I
Perfect.
do. Let's see, just make sure I can go.
Go ahead. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. My name is Luke Maloney. I'm a general partner in a venture capital firm called Space Fund. Space Fund is a venture capital firm investing in the space sector, but particularly we invest in frontier expanding space technology companies. So we're not just investing in heritage aerospace. We're not just investing in communication satellites. We're investing in ventures that will expand humanity's reach into the great beyond. Let me see if I can advance slides as I can. Okay, good. So why space? You know, there's lots of things that are happening in space. There's new product services and entire industries that are available through commerce in space. And we are just, we're just starting to scratch the surface of what's going to happen. And I say here unlimited resources, although as a scientific, from a scientific perspective, nothing's unlimited. But compared to what's available on Earth, what's available in space is virtually unlimited. There's so much space, there's so much resource, there's so much energy available in space. And also, space is the next frontier of human endeavor. We've long dreamed of being spacefaring, and we're just about to become spacefaring. Let's see, next. Oh, yes. So why now? This is a big question. A lot of our ancestors grew up in an era when they thought that, you know, we would have moon bases and, you know, starships and so on. And we are gambling on the fact that this is happening now. A few really important trends are happening. For example, we all have heard of the great billionaires doing great $1 billion of investments in space ventures. And we also have major reductions in size and cost of key hardware. So it's, you know, the electronic hardware is getting smaller, the satellites are getting smaller, as per our talk earlier about SmallSats. And also the launch costs are coming down. They need to come down a lot further, but as you can see from this graph, they've come down a lot in the last few decades. What else? So another thing that's interesting is that government is kind of getting out of the way of space commerce. It used to be that space programs were only done by governments and usually only done for strategic reasons. But now governments are kind of getting out of the way. And so instead of being the main actors in space, they're leveraging commercial space businesses by buying services, giving grants to startups, and even in some countries, creating legal frameworks to kickstart industries. The economic opportunity in space is huge. And this is really important, I think, to understand, is that the startups that are going to be the titans of space in the future, they're probably already going, or at least they're already launching, or at least those businesses are already running. We can guess that, you know, maybe Starlink and OneWeb and Kuiper, or at least some of those are going to be big in the future. But, you know, there's a lot of companies that we don't really track right now because they're small. They're going to be huge in the future. What else? So Space Fund, I'll get into the people who we are later, but, you know, some of us kind of helped kickstart the new space revolution. And I like to think that I am involved with perhaps the most informed team of actors in this in the world of what industries are going to be huge in the future. So here's a little graphic of the verticals that we track, the sectors of opportunity. Now, we don't necessarily invest in all of these, but we like to categorize companies that we're looking at in some of these verticals. On the left there, the very first one under transportation is Earth to Space, or launch. This is kind of the sexiest and most often talked about vertical in the new space movement, but it's actually a vertical we don't invest in. And the reasons are very simple. There's just too many actors in there. But we do track all of the companies that we can hear of in the space launch sector. There's lots of other sectors there, you know, like habitat, satellite servicing, space-to-space transport, and beyond Earth orbit communication are areas that we're very interested in and actually are investing in. And I'll get to a few of the companies we're investing in a minute. So we think that we have the right strategy for investing in space. You know, we have a really good deal flow. We track about 2,000 companies in the space sector. That is a lot of companies, but compared to some other sectors that are not in the space domain, it's not a great deal. However, we think that we're tracking most of the relevant companies in the space sector. And we have, you know, we think we have pretty good savvy of the financial and industrial implications of each of these companies. And, you know, we have pretty good, well, spirit selection, but also the deal flow. Like, we often have access to deals that, you know, are private placements and so on, just because of the fact that we seem to know everybody in the space industry. The space industry is pretty small. It's not a huge, huge business. And then we've got a lot of insights. I'm not going to get into this today, but we have a thing you can look up on our website. We have the Space Fund Reality Rating, which is the way that we rank how realistic we think companies are based upon an internal metric, and we share that data to the public. And that's it's an important service for other investors, but it's also very important for us. And I think that we are able to kind of get insight into who's a relevant player due to all that research we do. And anyways, I'll skip on to the next slide here. I can't go down. This is a snapshot of our key management team. I'm not on this page. I'm a general partner. but these are the main partners. Rick Tomlinson is the founding partner. He's often considered to be the godfather of space because he's, it's not just his personality, but the influence he has on a lot of really key players in the industry. For example, he's got Buzz Aldrin and Jeff Bezos on his speed dial on his phone. He's got a long history of doing largely space activism, and he's also done a few startups that were a bit too early, such as Deep Space Industries. He addressed the sector a bit too early. So I had to think long and hard before joining Space Fund about whether or not we are too early to the game. And we may be, who knows, better than being too late though, I think. Jeff Mertz is a new partner. He comes from a deep background in venture capital, and we're happy to have him join us and bring a great deal of professionalism to our project. He's also our closer. And finally, Megan Crawford, the managing partner, the other founder with Rick, is one of the smartest people I've ever worked with. She has a lot of industry experience working with NASA, and also runs her own space startup called Eden Grow Systems, which is a robotic greenhouse operation which intends to eventually deploy greenhouses in space. She also has a podcast. She's a wonderful woman. I hope you all meet her someday. Let's see next. Oh, there's all the text. Here's a quick snapshot of the first few companies we've invested in. Some of these you may have heard of, some of them you may not. Made in Space is additive manufacturing in space. They launched a few 3D printers on the International Space Station, and now they're doing two really exciting projects. They're doing making fiber optic cables in space, which is a big deal. And also they're making satellites which partly assemble themselves. The Archinaut 1 will launch soon, and it will extrude its own structure. Axiom Space, they're big in the news right now. If you look them up, you'll see that they have a huge contract from NASA to build the next generation space station. It's going to start off as a module to the ISS, will eventually grow into its own space station, which will separate. And they are making space habitats commercially. So with the near future growth of space hotels and space tourism, we expect that Axiom Space to be a major player. Orbit Fab is a really lovely company. They're making, initially they're making refueling ports for satellites. So satellites can be refueled for whatever their liquid propellants are. If it's hydrazine or xenon or water, these guys can refuel them. And they're going to build in-space fueling depots and service tugs. So one of the, key verticals that we like to target is how do we make satellites live longer in space and extend their life. So on-orbit service is what Orbit Fab is planning to do, and they're doing quite well. So getting to the space internet part of the talk, we've already heard mention of how many satellites are going up, and this is like a rough analysis of what we think is going up. Like Starlink may launch up to 42,000 satellites. OneWeb's launching 650. Kuiper, we don't really know, but 3,000 or so. No one knows anything about Kuiper. And then the other factor is there's so many other players who are planning to launch. SCS, Shiguan, Telesat, Iridium, Kepler, Hongyan. Like so many of these companies I have never heard of outside of presentations within Space Fund, but there's so many going up. So we're not investing in any of these constellations ourselves because we think we're actually too late to the game. And the major players, Starlink, OneWeb, and Kuiper, they're funded from internal investment, and we can't really access them. However, this is creating a new market. So some of the things that we like to think about are, in the traffic management world, there's space situational awareness, constellation management and tracking, and debris removal or debris avoidance will be huge in the future with that many satellites up in space. And the last mile problem, we have space tugboats and onboard propulsion to move satellites from rideshare drop-off points to the desired orbit. That's an emerging market. Satellite servicing, I mentioned Orbit Fab there, that they're refueling spacecraft, and also a company we just missed investing in is there's Altius, and they're making space tugs, and that are going to be accessible to. They have a mating port on all the OneWeb satellites. That's a really interesting future emerging market. And data processing, of course. I mean, this is the world we're all in. Ground stations, intersatellite links, on-orbit data processing, storage, and whatever else is going to be happening with the untold terabytes of data that are going to be communicated in this network. So that's Space Fund. There's my email. Please email me or call me if you have any questions. If you know anybody who wants to get into the space industry, or if you have a small space business that you think we should be aware of, please let me know.
No, thank you.
No.
No.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Thank you, Luke. Yeah. Yeah. I think it was very nice to hear from technical perspective, like, you know, the venture capital angle, the legal angle, the demand side angle, and the business challenges. Right?
You have the meet, maybe?
Yeah, that'll be fine. Yeah, we don't have a lot of time to get into questions with all of the panelists, but I'll probably pick, you know, like whoever is with us here, and maybe ask you a question on the legal side. Really, I mean, what do you see as the highest barrier to entry and the biggest challenge to overcome to get all this into reality?
Hi. Well, the most important now about this big number of satellites should be the question of the space debris. They are working in the United Nations and different entities. What should be the best solution? Because obviously we can stop it to produce at the new satellite that go ahead. The question is, what is the system to avoid the risk of the collisions and that not only for another satellites, including for the International Space Station. One of the ideas that the people are thinking, that the people that put one satellite in orbit, if they are thinking about constellation, is change one of the satellites that they are operative for another one. That maintain the same level, and don't forget it, that well, this satellite is out of service and we forget it. It's very important to remember that if you are talking about thousands of satellites, the time for this satellite goes down to the atmosphere should be months of years, because a big satellite with capability of maneuver, you can hold to another orbit and avoid this problem. But with thousands of satellites, should be more important to have traffic control of these satellites. Also, when we are talking with a big corporation, probably they are a lot of liability about this control. But when we are talking about little companies that put only 5, 7 satellites for give, probably don't have the same level of control. This should be one of the, entre a lot of things, one of the most important question now.
Yeah, thank you very much. And actually, I concur. And I don't think it's like, you know, just on the legal side. If you look at the technology side, the business side, I mean, this comes on top as one of the main issues, all the debris and the satellite pollution that one has to overcome. So thank you very much. Yeah. I mean, this gives me a chance to basically, very briefly wrap up and summarize the 3 sessions here. I think if we look at the 360 view of what's happening in the LEO constellation worlds, I mean, clearly there is the opportunity and there are the challenges here, right? And we've seen this opportunity challenge, like, you know, equation from various angles, the technology angle, the researchers with the new issues to go and overcome, the financiers, I mean, the guys financing all of this and the risks they're taking and how to approach it, as well as the legal, right? I think, you know, the takeaway here is, you know, as was highlighted in some of the sessions, is going to be very important for all the stakeholders and parties involved to go and focus on their area expertise and address these challenges. But I think there is a need to have them work with each other globally. And it's that synergy, I think, from user demand all the way to an execution and a deployment and addressing the challenges that will, you know, probably make it happen. So I think that's a conclusion of all the sessions. And it's a good way to hand it over to
now, just we have a surprise, I would say. But before moving to the hands-on, that will be for the next 15 minutes, and you will have the opportunity to know how yourself you are able to program or to schedule a mission of a satellite that you may have. So we have the presence here of the Secretary of Digital Policies that will give a few words to us just to close the sessions that we had on the speaking session. So David, you are welcome to say a few words. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Okay, thank you to share with us this amazing workshop regarding with a huge opportunity in the LEO space. So, for the government perspective, it's as the last panelist said very well, it's a huge economic opportunity that we don't lose. We want to work in this new era for our economy. It's the next step for our digital roadmap regarding with digital advanced technology. So the Catalan government wants to take place in this new economy opportunity. So from 2018, we have been working in this topic. I hope that before the summer we finalize. I expect to finalize our Catalan strategy in new space economy. So for me, it's a very important opportunity for the government, for the digital services that the government can use in this kind of services, and of course for the Catalan companies and the other companies that want to come here in Catalonia to deploy his services and business. So thank you very much to be here. Thank you very much for the people that come from abroad and to the people that are abroad. Thank you very much and good afternoon.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, David, and thank you very much, Rafael. So it's good. We still have 80 people connected online, so I think that it's a good atmosphere we have. So now I want to give the floor to our colleagues from Open Cosmos. I think that, okay, over there. So the idea is that now we will have the session about mission design, demo, and hands-on workshop. So we will learn about the tools and how they are helping to democratize this technology and to make accessible to much more broad audience nowadays. So we have Aleix, we have met Aleix before in the session, and then we will have also Danny Source, which is the head of customer success in Open Cosmos. So you are welcome to come here to the stage. Thank you. So by the way, just before you are leaving, I mean, we have Riad. Riad is taking the flight in 15 minutes, so we want to just clap you and thank you for your support and participation. Okay, keep in touch. Good, so Aleix, you're welcome. Oh, you're bringing one of your toys here, so yeah, sure.
Hello. Yeah, I brought one of the.
Okay,
it's not a toy. It's a payload development platform.
Okay, cool.
It's a bit more complex.
Okay, yeah, I was thinking. I mean,
but
you just send this up there.
It is indeed a tool that, as I was explaining before, a tool that we have designed to simplify the way payloads, so instruments are to fly in satellites, are developed and integrated or developed in a way that their integration with the final spacecraft is much simpler and it can be done from the very early design phase from a payload, from an instrument.
Good.
So yeah, we do have a couple of tools. One of them it's called Open App. It's a cloud-based simulator tool, mission design tool that allows our customers from the very beginning of the design phase of the space mission to basically simulate different orbits, simulate different conditions for the spacecraft once it's in orbit, and test what type of visibility, field of view, link budget, etc., the payload will have depending on what type of payload it is. So we can talk about.
You are meaning that you are empowering the user to have a full control of the payload that they have.
That's right. That's right. So that's one of the tools. That's a cloud-based tool, and then we have a hardware tool, which is one of the models here. This is the hardware. So all the mechanical, electrical data interfaces that a payload will face once integrated into the actual spacecraft. into the CubeSat. So it's basically an emulator that allows our customers or payload developers from day one to design against these interfaces and validate them, test them before they ship the payload to our facilities for integration into the spacecraft. So it's really, really advancing and de-risking the integration phase of the
how many,
spacecraft.
I would say, taking into consideration all the failures that you could have up there, with the testing platform that you have and all the simulation tools that you are providing, I mean, how many of these percentages are you able to cover? You mean that there will be still a 5% risk up there after your testing, or you think that you are able to provide a 9.999% of assurance besides whatever crashes over there?
It's not really, I mean, this tool, it definitely helps reduce the risk and success of the mission, but what it does, it kind of shares the development effort that needs to be done so that it reduces massively the time of going from designing a payload to flying it into orbit. And that's one of the things that, at least in our company, we're very proud of the very short time scales that we're able to put spacecraft.
How long does it take a test process, more or less, as a payload?
It's a very good question. Normally, it will depend on the payload. Normally, we compare is what would it take to do it without this or doing it with this. So we're doing with this tool, we have had several examples where they've done it down to 3 months, when probably if we did the normal way of exchanging interface requirement documents, interface control documents, et cetera, could take 6 to 9 months or more. I mean, for big space missions, it takes up to years, right?
That's great. Yeah.
This is really the power of this tool is to do this. So Danny, I think.
Yeah, sure.
So he
just a last question. Sorry, because some people here maybe does not know this. I mean, when you are talking about payload, about size of a nanocube, what's the size of this?
So this is this is what at the beginning we had Adriano comes explaining about the CubeSat. Yeah. This is basically a CubeSat. This is the size of what we call a 3U CubeSat.
This is a 3U.
Yeah, this is a 3U CubeSat. And what this kit is basically the actual structure that the spacecraft has. And then it has a mechanical box, well, an interface box here that emulates everything that the satellite has. So then it gives some volume here to put your actual payload. We have a demo payload here that maybe we'll be showing how it works, hopefully. But yeah, this works together with the cloud-based tool, and basically it allows to do hardware in the loop testing, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, good. So well, I'll let you now follow up with explanations, or I don't know. I think that you are projecting something, right? Yeah, so please, can you provide the projections?
I might need the microphone, right?
So it's cool to see that this is so small and you can control all of this from the air. So
great. So,
nice.
Oops.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks,
Danny, welcome.
Yeah, I will control directly with the laptop.
Let me know if I need to help you or something.
I think we're good so far. So I'm going to ask the audience to switch on your laptops if you have any, or especially the ones that are following remotely. We're going to go a bit hands-on to design perhaps what could be a constellation, and for you to have a bit of an impression of how is the process that Aleix was mentioning before regarding the software tools and the hardware tools that we've developed to simplify the whole process of sending potential technology, a payload, an instrument, a sensor to space. A quick introduction, and I know that we've been already mentioning this already before. So Space 4.0, these are a bit the main blocks between old school in space and a bit more the new approach. We're going to focus here in the many missions instead of only a single mission. Oh, perfect. Thanks a lot. Can you hear me? Yes? Okay, thank you. That's much better. Right. So a couple of slides just to introduce Space 4.0. We come from 2 main countries developing space missions, and now there are many more players. I need to invest more time on that. Reduction of cost, especially in the launch segment. Now we're using the rockets. There's a clear tendency in reducing the cost, so that means that more players are joining this new space, right? As we were mentioning before. This graph shows very well how the private sector is jumping in with more and more satellites being launched from the private segment instead of the public segment. So as a rough order of magnitude, missions used to cost millions, and we're coming now to hundreds of thousands, perhaps, for a mission like this one, such as 3 units that it was introducing before. And from years down to months, how do we develop missions instead of
instead of from years, how do we do it in months? So that's what we're going to discover a bit now. What you see here is a bit how the satellites look in space compared to a standard big satellite. And we're going to do this exercise of answering why a space and how to make it possible using constellations. So this question was made just before. I want you to make an exercise of how we could be solving one of these sustainable development goals using a space. In this example that we're going to do now, a bit more hands-on, I'm going to pick, for obvious reasons, number 3 here, which is health in these particular days. But please make the exercise of, depending on your field, what you are working on, the projects that you have in hands, how could a constellation support any of these SDGs that you see here? Or if you are more from the commercial sector, pick one of the 3 main areas that normally we cover in space missions. That could be remote sensing, which is normally Earth observation, telecoms, navigations, or research and exploration that we've been hearing quite some interesting projects before. So please pick or have in mind at least one application for to be solved or to be supported with a constellation deployed in space. And let's work now on our particular objective, which would be launching a constellation of satellites to solve a particular problem. We're going to be focusing now in phase 0 or A for the ones that are familiar in the space sector. Normally, this is a bit of the workload in a space mission. So we're going to be doing some kind of concept studies, some feasibility studies to see which kind of orbits could make sense. And we're going to think on a mission architecture. We will have to define a payload, and the platform will have to fulfill the requirements of the payload. So we will think a bit on these 2 blocks that constitute the whole spacecraft. And then we'll have to think about the orbits, which kind of orbits, which geometries would support that particular mission. And obviously the ground segment, which antennas we should be using and where should they be located and so on and so forth to receive all the data down. Then the launch normally goes very linked to orbit. And as I mentioned before, there is a lot going on in that block that is really reducing the costs of space missions. So for the ones that have laptops, especially the ones at home, I would suggest you to open a new tab and join this staging.bapp.space/next. For the ones here in the audience, if you have a laptop, please try to log into by using, we recommend Chrome or Mozilla Firefox, but feel free to use any web browser that you are using normally, and try to log in with this Starman OC Gmail account, which is a demo that we created for this purpose today. And the password that we're going to be using is Jupiter with the J in capital 05. Let us know how you progress. Any thumbs up? Anybody following here? I know in the chat, if you are following, please maybe comment it so we are aware of this. I'm going to quickly click in it, and we're going to enter this online software platform that we introduced before, but it's called VApp. Let me log out so you will see a bit how you are supposed to see it, so nobody gets scared. It's going to ask you for a username and a password. By the way, that's an interesting exercise for us, as we've never probably been launching 200 simulations maybe in one go.
All the bugging.
Yes, so I'll take the opportunity to debug perhaps. Yeah.
The user, can you repeat please the user?
Yes, sorry,
password, please.
It's, yeah.
We still have, 60 people in the internet, so you can repeat maybe this login and user password to be sure that everybody gets it.
Staging.bapp.space/next. I will keep here.
Maybe if you write,
seconds.
It's writing it here or not? Maybe
yeah,
you can write it and people can easily follow you.
Right. So maybe I can write it in the chat. Let's see.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if as soon as I click, there we go. Okay, let's put it in the chat of the meeting, which is right here, I guess. Annotate, control more. No, I don't think that's the case. Yeah, well, if somebody can do it.
Well, yeah. If you can tell Aleix, maybe the people over there. And
right. So Jupiter 05, and then you log in. That's basically the landing page, and you should be able to log in straight away. Right. So now when we enter in BApp, you will see that there are a few modules. These are the modules that we thought that makes sense to be efficient, in order to be efficient to develop a space mission. There are three main blocks that you see in the bottom, which is mission design, especially for early, I would say, simulations, analysis, and to do this kind of phase zero concept designs of a mission, and getting all these parameters narrowed down for the ones that are going to be the final ones to go to orbit. Then there is the hardware in the loop, in which the hardware that you see over here takes place. You will see that there are two main cables here. They are a bit bulky because they are space rated. One of it, it's ending in a USB, which means that it connects directly to any laptop, and you can start programming whatever payload, whatever instrument you plug into the satellite qualification platform. And the other one, it just finishes with a positive and negative. So that's simulating the solar panels. We normally recommend to use a PSU, but for demo purposes with a standard transformer, we just plug it to operate IoT. I think there is an IoT device and a camera as well. So this normally, it's when we enter in a stage of a mission in which there is a hardware and instrument ready to be integrated into a satellite and to be programmed and tested and qualified towards real satellite interfaces. That's quite interesting block. And the third one that you see here is obviously operations. So the idea is that we receive the payload back, we send it to space, and then the users can operate their payloads and can retrieve the data exactly from the same web browser as they've been interacting in the beginning. So that's how we cover from early design until operations in space, following these three main blocks that you see here. Today, we're going to focus right now in the next maybe 5-10 minutes that we have left to explore a bit these modules, what they offer. The first one, it's focusing about the payload. So when we enter here, we see a set of different payloads that we could be using. But if we are payload developers, maybe we would like to add our own payload. This could be done by defining, for instance, it could be an imager, or it could be whatever other kind of payload in communications, in research, in optical, as we mentioned before, these three main blocks. And then we could define the physical aspects of it, like how big it is, how heavy it is, which thermal constraints my payload has, and perhaps the modes, like how much data it's generating, how much power it's consuming, and so on and so forth. For the matter of simplifying this, I'm just going to select an optical one, let's say a hyperspectral imager. I'm having in mind this third sustainable development goal, which is health. So I will try to image some parts of the Earth, let's say, with this simulation of a constellation that we are following. As soon as there is one payload, at least one payload selected, the block goes in green. This means that the second one is unlocked, so I can go to the next phase. Next phase, it's mission geometry. Let's go inside. There are a lot of things I could mention here. I'll try to keep it very simple. So normally in these constellations we've been talking before, you want to monitor or you want to communicate to different places on Earth. So normally the way you design constellations is by assigning points of interest. I will start by fetching one of the points of interest. I mentioned I was in this third sustainable development goal about health. So obviously I'm going to write Wuhan, perhaps, for obvious reasons these days. So let's try to monitor what's the situation there. We could be adding any point at our will. Perhaps like we could just point one point in the US, for instance, or we can just fetch Barcelona. Let's try to put Barcelona as well. So this is a search engine in which you can select not only points, particular coordinates on Earth, but you can also fetch regions. So in this particular application, I'm going to fetch Italy, as it was perhaps the first, one of the first countries, if not the first, to be kind of known because of these health issues these days. So I'm adding Italy here. Yeah.
What is the lower level you can go
in terms of that's a good point. So you can zoom as much as you want.
So you could go into a city also.
Exactly. Yes. This is using a standard search engine. So You can go into as much detail. It doesn't make sense to go very precisely because satellites, they fly quite fast. So normally that's why I didn't zoom in, but you could literally go, it's with the main standard Google engine, so you can go quite into detail. You can also draw in the map like areas straight away. So let's say you monitor the Caribbean and you can just add it there. So that's a bit my geometry I want to monitor in this particular mission. Please feel free to follow on and put your points of interest for your particular application. If you want to monitor rainforests, for instance, you would put Brazil, or you would put maybe some islands because the sea rays, perhaps it's about to map them out. So feel free to put as many points of interest and regions of interest as you want. Now I'm just gonna launch, maybe let's add another big one. So we make sure that we get some visits, some passes in the next 24 hours. So I'm gonna add Iran, for instance, and I'm gonna choose an orbit. There are many ways to input an orbit, but the easiest way to understand how a constellation might work is by deploying this worker, what's called the worker constellation, in which we only have to put perhaps the altitude that we are aiming at. This could be feeding the launch segment access that we might have. And then we can choose how many satellites per plane. Let's choose 2 satellites. And let's choose 2 planes. So now we'll have four satellites being deployed in 2 different planes, okay? And I'm gonna add an inclination of 50 degrees, for instance. And in just one click, I just have my worker constellation there. I could be adding as many orbits as I want to do this analysis. And I'm gonna launch this simulation. So you will see that basically what's happening now, it's in a few seconds, we are running a kind of a powerful simulation. This means that we don't need super high processing capabilities on site. Everything happens in the cloud, in our servers, and we can unlock more or less capabilities depending on how demanding the simulations are. This is unlocking a whole set of new simulations and analysis features and capabilities. This is the end of the result after this one full day simulation. There are a lot of things we could see here. This is the illumination, for instance, but you can generate as many graphs as you want, change its size. But I want to know, for example, when I could be imaging Barcelona, for example. So if I click here, I see that in the next 24 hours, in these worker constellations, we would have these 2 satellites. They would be flying in these time frames in particular. And you can monitor as many parameters as you want from your constellations. This could be the eccentricity over time, how it varies, as you can see here. This could be the inclination, if there is some drifting or not. So you could assess if you need propulsion systems or not, and so on and so forth. So that's a very straightforward way to assess if the orbit that you are choosing is good or not. Okay, having said that, we are working towards optimizing this. So what you've seen now that you've been putting it manually, the system, it's going to optimize it and offer solutions for you. So we're going to the next level, let's say, in which things are being optimized for you. So you get the best results or the best orbits possible based on your inputs, based on your regions or your points of interest or your mission requirements.
May I make you another question, please?
Sure.
I mean, well, I had the chance also, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, to talk with Aleix and Rafael. And it seems that you not only have the payload, but you also have some CPU capabilities on the satellite itself that you could also empower the user to manage part of the CPU that belongs to the satellite. So would we be able also, by means of your tools, to manage this part of CPU which does not belong to the payload?
That's correct. That's a very good point. So I think that this CPU capability that you mentioned is what we call normally the PIU. That it's
sorry for the technology of
yeah.
the
PIU is what we call the payload interface unit, which offers not only processing capabilities, as you were mentioning, but also memory space. And this is offered to the payload. It's basically offering more capabilities to the payload.
An extension. So it means that we can not only manage our payload, but the extra capabilities that the satellite could bring to me, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
In a way, that's a way to put it. Yes. It's all about giving flexibility to the payload and to the end application, the end goal. And yeah, processing and memory, it's one of the main parameters. Yes. So yeah, I could mention a lot of things. Feel free to play around with it. I could generate a report in one click. So here you see a full PDF full of sections. So I could see basically, let's see in Barcelona, which are the main parameters, the mean. So the total time of this particular pass is 150 seconds. So I could do all the analysis I want with this. I can download all these data points. I can erase sections. So if if I'm not interested in USA anymore for a report, I just click here, and this block just basically disappears from the report. I could download it to submit it for projects for whatever reasons I might need to report or to have traceability of my progress. In one click, you can download all these things, and you have them directly in your laptop, so you can, in a future stage, you can upload again and iterate again with your mission scenarios. This is for example, the report of this full constellation. Well, it's a four satellite constellation, but here you could see the main parameters summarized in a PDF that I've just downloaded directly into my laptop. Right, so let's say that I'm happy now. I see that I'm going through Barcelona. There were a few nice passes over Barcelona. There were a few nice passes over Italy as well. So I'm happy about it. And then the next stage would be, you will see that now it goes in green. So it would be the ground segment. Let's choose the antennas or the ground segment, what we call the ground segment. There's going to be an optimization process as well. But right now, the user can already start playing and interacting with its constellation by choosing a set of ground stations and assessing which ones are the best. This is something it's been done always manually, but now with these capabilities, we are starting to implement these new features. So that would be it regarding the ground segment as well. There is a full simulation on the visibility of each of the ground stations, so we can pick which antennas and where it makes more sense to choose them. Then again, there is the report that can be done, and you can download it as well. So just to close a bit this session, obviously for my mission, yeah, I didn't put it in detail, but for my mission, as it's a 50-degree inclination mission, it doesn't make sense to pick very north ground stations. This antenna has no passes. But if it would be a polar orbit or a polar constellation or a sun-synchronous constellation, it would make much more sense to pick higher latitudes. And in this model, you can see it very well. So just to close and to wrap up, let me do a bit of an overview of how the process would be later on. So now we would have the payload, the mission, and the ground segment defined. The platform you see, it's coming soon. Our software team is working hard just to release this module in the following days, I believe. And in this particular module, the user will be able to define the main subsystems or the deployables, the configuration of the whole spacecraft, just to close the mission at the spacecraft level. Once these 4 main blocks are in green, then as I mentioned before, then it's when we encourage the users to engage with the hardware. And it's where the big kit comes into place. We plug it through a USB, and then we can start deploying the code, the scripts, the software packages to make the payload operational. And just the last remark would be operations. This is a whole new world. Once you are in a space, there are a lot of things going on. You have to schedule commands, all the data that is going to be downloaded, processing it, delivering it safely, securely to the end user. So that's why you see a few more blocks that they will be released and used in the future missions that we have ahead. And that's a bit right. Yes. So just to close, let me point out we're using these demo user accounts. If you go to our website in the link that you see here, there is a quick form. You just provide your name and an email address, and you can get your own user and password, basically your credentials to use this tool. We are offering it right now for free for education purposes, for capacity building purposes. We've been doing workshops all around the world. As it's an online tool, especially for the first phases, it's quite straightforward. You only need an internet and just a web browser. And then you can get also a free trial for commercial purposes as well. So that's a bit in a nutshell, in maybe 15, 20 minutes, how a constellation design could
That's
look.
very cool, actually. I mean, now that we have been talking about new space, new economy, this is a new tool. I mean, how is the competition in Open Cosmos? I mean, when you see worldwide, how many, for example, companies are offering this type of tool sets to manage their missions, operations, and so on? Do you think that you are quite unique, or there are a few of them? What do you think about that?
Right. Oh, sorry.
I think what we just seen is this is really unique. I mean, if you go around the market, you can indeed find tools that help you simulate, some tools that help you operate your spacecraft. What we have put together, these tools help us deliver this end-to-end space mission service, and there's no other tool in the market that can really help you go through this whole process from day one, starting to develop your payload and get it integrated into the spacecraft and into orbit in a single product. So these tools are really a differentiator in here. And we have actually many users already benefiting from these, and we have seen this really step change. It's all about reducing the barriers of access to space, right? And this is the first step into doing this. Then of course, like CubeSats, very small satellites right now is a very hot topic. There are many companies developing technology. It's been mostly focused on building some electronics, selling that hardware to some universities to do type of DIY, build your own satellite type of thing. Now, Open Cosmos has been founded from day one to a very commercial mindset where it's all about the service. It's all about giving this end-to-end space mission service to enable companies that have never done anything with space, right? I mean, they wouldn't know how to build a spacecraft, and they don't have to. They have to focus on how to build that telecommunication service, how to commercialize it, how to put how to commercialize an Earth observation imaging set, etc., etc. So, and we are one of the pioneers in enabling this end-to-end thing. So I think this answers your question. I mean, there's definitely competition, but what we are putting into the market is certainly unique.
There is one question in the online. So there's a person which is asking, how is the time and sync distributed for the satellite?
Sorry?
How is the time and the synchronization distributed for the satellite?
Right. I guess that they refer to one of the simulations maybe that they are running, because there is a sync. Let me
sync. I don't know if you have any synchronization service or something like this.
Right. So I have the feeling that it's related to this.
If the person from the online, please, can be just a bit more explicit on the question, otherwise.
Yeah, if it's about this synchronization button, this sync all, that might be, the answer is quite simple. It's just to synchronize all these graphs. So if let's imagine that I want to zoom in one of these graphs. These are all synchronized, so you can synchronize all of them or desynchronize to be able to compare in time in a parallel way, or just decouple them. I guess that this is the question. Otherwise, if they can be more specific.
Okay, no. Thank you very much. I think that at least it was the first explanation. Cool. So, well, I think that we have arrived at the end. So I want to really appreciate. I don't know if there is any question, by the way, in the audience. Any one of you wants to make any question? I mean, they just came from UK for this, especially, so good.
Only related to the time is. Yes, sorry. My name is Andrew from Nauta Signals company. If we can get the forecast prediction of the time in UTC, for example, if you have a transmission to do, so if we can get it in future time to know when to transmit in the past. So is it done in your simulation?
Yeah, absolutely. So here, I didn't mention this because I just went straight away to make it very simple. But here on the top, you see when it says date. So you can put any date you would like to analyze. So if I close this, I could choose any date in the future or in the past. Maybe I want to analyze a mission that I already have in space, like what would have happened if I had chosen another rocket, no, or whatever the other things you would like to simulate. And then you can just add as many days as you want. So you could be doing a simulation in a week time, or in a duration of a week time, or a month time, and so on and so forth. So it's as flexible as putting in a starting date and a duration to do these simulations.
The satellite will do it exactly, no? When it is launched. So the passes will be done at his exact time.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So this is supposed to replicate the reality.
Yeah, okay.
Then it's always difficult to match exactly the reality, because then, especially with a rocket launch, you never know how the things can end up. And we are going to feed. We're basically feeding the launch segment into the potential orbits that you could reach. And this is going to be displayed here. That's what I was mentioning before. There's going to be a launch probably narrowed down in terms of the launch windows that you could be potentially be launching, ride sharing in a major rocket. That's normally what happens with these satellite missions. Or in terms of more dedicated or smaller rockets, if there is more flexibility, you could be able, you will basically be able to see when exactly this launch could be happening in the future in a realistic way, based on our supply chain on the launch segment.
Thank you. Thank you. No, working now. Okay, thank you very much. Another question, yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. It's quite interesting, this tool. Just I have a question. There is a maximum number of satellites that you can simulate simultaneously?
Mm-hmm. Very good question. Probably maybe the audience that have been geeking around maybe at home, they will see maybe that it's capped right now. We're a bit scared of having 250 simulations of 1,000 satellites each, and may blow up our servers. So right now, it's especially for this staging site that you saw, it was a bit contained to make sure that we increase the success rate of the simulations. We are willing to conduct very powerful simulations, and normally it's very difficult if you have users spread all around the world. It's very difficult that exactly at the same second you're launching 2,000 satellite constellations at the same time. So we've been experiencing that you can do quite powerful ones. In terms of numbers, I'm not able to tell you because it really depends on the regions of interest. If you choose Russia, for instance, it's not the same as choosing an island, right? So it really depends on all the points of interest, the regions of interest, and obviously the constellation and the amount of satellites that you are doing simulations. But as you saw, we launched a simulation of I think constellation of 4 satellites, and it was about 5-10 seconds more or less. So you can extrapolate a bit the numbers. We are aiming probably to be below a minute for constellations of tens of satellites. That's a bit the order of magnitude. But feel free to log in and launch the simulations and try to reach the limit and come back to us to increase the capability. We'll be happy to increase it.
Okay, thanks.
I have another online. Sorry. No, please, Monica. No, Monica, go ahead.
Thank you. It's great. I guess not, but I still would like to ask whether you could do this the opposite, the other way around. Let's say you fix the coverage for a given payload, let's say given swath, and the number of days in which you want to reach the coverage, and it would give you the a possible constellation that would reach those user requirements.
Very good point, and this is not released in this version. I don't want to announce to say too many details, but they're going to be a top level tree, what we call the tree map of questions. It's going to be for people that they have a clear idea, and maybe for governments they know exactly what they want to do, but they don't want to enter into detail into the technologies. So these questions are going to be very top level. If it's about Earth observation, which kind of main areas is it about? And then try to make the right questions to get the key input parameters that then allow our system to run these optimization processes and come up to a full solution for you in terms of all the subsystems needed, how many satellites with geometries, not only this, but also the timelines, the delivery expected timelines to make it happen, and the cost associated to it.
That's an important detail indeed.
Yeah, we're working towards having this release as soon as possible.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Thanks.
Yes, there is another question back at the end of the room. Yeah. Thank you, Ivan, for the mic.
Yeah, so I would like to know if there's some kind of way that we can know the launching opportunities, because we know that it's a key factor that can determine the constellation availability. So it would be possible to know beforehand the launch opportunities to mount the constellation.
Right. So right now, this was the beta version that we have. I'm going to do a bit of a spoiler here, perhaps. but there is a full list of our potential launch opportunities that we have. And this is already available with the current V app, the stable version, let's say, the one that normally our users use. You can see it here. So we have a full list of launchers and the dates, potential dates. And in the case in which the orbit is limited, because there is a main satellite that knows the inclination, for instance, we offer this information. So here is where you can see straight away which dates you could be aiming to launch. And if there is any restriction on the orbit because you are ride sharing, we offer this information as well. So short answer is yes. And we're going to implement all this into this beta version that you saw before.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I have another question that comes from the people which are online. The question is, can we run a simulation for the, I would say here, I don't know which is the 4, yeah, for the Sustainable Development Goals number 4, which is education across Africa, to use as a cost assessment to connect every person in Africa, which is 1 billion people?
Right. that sounds like a big challenge. Yeah, that might be a bit of iteration. So I don't think we can do it now in 5 minutes, perhaps. But you could start getting a bit of an impression. In terms of education, connectivity is quite important. This tool, for instance, doesn't work without internet. And there are constellations that are starting to tackle this. We saw an example of IoT applications and constellations that might connect nodes wherever they are in the globe. So this kind of constellations and simulations can easily be run to literally connect 2 billion nodes, perhaps. Normally, this I would summarize it into getting the main urban areas, because normally the population, I think more than 50% of the population lives in urban areas, and those normally they are well connected. It's more about this divide, this rural divide sometimes, and that is where you can start putting nodes more precisely and get a rough order of magnitudes of how many satellites, perhaps, how high or how low, what's most efficient to be done.
Yeah. I guess the tool is still not there yet, but I mean we can definitely work together to make that to make that happen.
Not there yet because it means that it will, right?
Yeah, I mean indeed, like in the development roadmap of the tool is to be able to get cost estimates for any type of design that you put in there and how long it would take to us to deploy these, etc., etc. So I mean you have only seen the very beginning of something that it has to really enable low cost, mission design for anybody on Earth. Yeah.
Okay, good. So thank you very much, Alex, Danny. So
Thank
we
you.
really appreciate your time and the hands-on that you have done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Okay, good. So now it's time to close. I just wanted to say that thank you very much. I mean, it's the first time ever that I run a 4 hours and a half workshop. And sorry, and we keep here with the audience. Obviously, some people had to leave, but also the internet audience. So we have around 70 people that I also say thank you for your staying there, listening, and also making some questions. So I think that it's a new opportunity. We are now in anywhere that as we have been seeing for the whole day. And I encourage you also to keep in touch. Most of you have registered, so you will receive the information, you will receive the slides and everything. But before finishing, I also want to thank Monica. I mean, basically we have a really nice place for our workshop, which is Alocha, and also the Tech Spirit of Barcelona. I have to say that we started to move all these workshop activities 2 weeks ago. I mean, we didn't expect that we'd manage to get all this audience, which is on site and online, but I think that we have done a very successful, I would say, work on achieving this, I would say, workshop on time with the people and with the content and also with the support from the camera in order to make it happen here in a very nice ambient and all the support that we have received. Thank you very much for everything. Thank you.